Maverick News, the antivirus program for your mind. And now, the Freedom Reporters.
Good evening, friends. I'm Rick Walker. This is the Maverick News Channel, and we are the Freedom Reporters.
Good evening. This is Brendan Kennedy, the co-host of the show, and it's good to see everybody. I am on the mend. Everything is getting better, so it's great to be back in action, and we got a really good show for you tonight.
Yeah, it's nice to see you survived another day with COVID, Brendan, and we've had... I received many phone calls today from people very concerned about your well-being. I assured them that you will survive and that you are on the mend.
I really appreciate that, folks. Anybody who has reached out to give me their best wishes, that's absolutely amazing. And every little bit helps.
We have a lot of stuff to talk about tonight. First of all, though, Kyle Kemper is here tonight. And I see that we do have quite a few people already watching in the audience. So there is a high level of interest in what Kyle has to share with us tonight. He has written a new book called CanaDAO. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I'm sure he'll correct me if I'm wrong, but he'll be joining us in just a few minutes. We do have some other things to talk about tonight if we have time, but we're going to give Kyle as much time as his subject deserves, and we'll see where the conversation leads. I think it's going to be a very productive and constructive conversation tonight. So very, very excited about it. What else do we have on tap tonight? Legislation pending in Ontario. I guess Doug Ford and the PCs are looking at a new law to limit or even prohibit protesting in the way that we saw with the Freedom Convoy, to prevent it from ever happening again. So we can chat about that. And Joe Biden in Poland today, speaking about the conflict in Ukraine, and says that Putin has to go. And even though he says they're not looking for regime change, he says Putin can't remain in power. So I don't know how you reconcile those two statements, but either way, that's what happened in Poland today. So we do have that queued up if we have time. We can run some of that later in the broadcast. But I think we want to get right to Kyle and bring him in on the conversation, because that's what everybody is waiting for tonight. Are we ready? Are we ready, Brendan, to do that?
Yes, let's let it rip.
Okay. And here he is, Kyle Kemper. Welcome.
Great to be here, Rick. Nice to meet both you, Rick and Brendan.
Thank you, sir.
It's my pleasure.
Yeah, very excited.
Let's dive in.
Thank you so much for joining us. It's a real privilege to have you on, and we appreciate you taking the time to talk to us tonight.
Well, and first off, thank you guys for, what you're doing right now. I think the need for independent voices and independent media is more important than ever. And all your viewers also probably recognize that, and we can't really ever expect for the mainstream media, it's a lost cause from my point of view now.
Yeah.
So the less we tune in and give it any power, the more power we hold within ourselves, and collectively we can start working on solutions and not seeking mainstream media validation for what we're doing. I think during the trucker convoy, a lot of people looked to the mainstream media, even knowing what was going on, looked to the mainstream media to is this real? But of course they just, they didn't tell the story. The story came from the people.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear your perspective on that, because it seems to me that the mainstream media, and I used to work for CTV for a long time, but that was, a number of years ago. I left there probably 9 or 10 years ago. But it seems to me they're abusing the public's trust that was built up over generations, where people came to trust the Canadian mainstream media. And I think many people still do, but it's not the same anymore. Or maybe they never deserved to have the trust. Maybe that trust was misplaced. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I feel that, like, the Canadian media has, done a really incredible job of building its trust over a long time. And they're like, it's very kind of insidious the way they slip their subjective narrative in a gentle, kind of loving way. It's not as, to the point as like the American media in its kind of clear left right isms, and that kind of false paradigm. But within Canada, I'd say, like, they're like, they've been for there just haven't been that many options, and it's very kind of small and controlled. And if we think about, like, I bet there's less than 100 kind of, like, vocal actors within the mainstream media who, like, represent 90% of the hits that they're getting. So when we think about, like, the actual number, like, yeah, I mean, it's like you could fill the number of these mainstream media reporters, like, in a bar. Like, that's that's the reality. And yet they are speaking and programming or theoretically they're programming, the masses' biases. But I don't believe anything they're really saying anymore. But they are great. It's great when you can, like, when you've become aware and awake to this information war and the tactics they use. I mean, you can draw a lot of information from the headlines and the reports, and basically in very short amount of time, kind of get the gist of what they're saying and also what they're planning and what their next moves are. So.
Yes, well, especially with the convoy, I think that it exposed, for anyone who was really looking and anyone that was consuming information from a broad number of sources, including independent sources, it was quite apparent to me that they were just at times blatantly lying.
And
yeah.
Twitter doesn't even allow them to hide their biases anymore. I did send Rick today a tweet from Michael O'Bine, and he is a CTV news worker, and he shouts out to a Toronto-based kind of butcher shop. He goes, "At Farm Boy, really surprised you've chosen not to keep your staff mask at least for a few more weeks. Maybe you can tell me why. Very disappointing." That's not news. That's biased opinion and kind of using your status and position to push your point on the public.
I know that. I saw that tweet too, and I was like, "Are you kidding me?" Like, you represent, like, journalism, which one of the, like, the tenets of it is kind of like objectivity, if you will, or at least theoretically it is. But then you, like, just like, that whole tweet was fine, except for that last part, like, very disappointing. Like, you're gonna use your platform to like, put that subjective thing and try and, like, create, I don't know, trying to get clicks, trying to gain awareness. Like, who cares about that guy? Whatever. He's just a shill. So
yeah, right there, Michael O'Byrne. I don't know him, but yeah, there he is.
Here I am in Cancun. Great.
Yeah, not wearing a mask.
No, not wearing a mask. And like, that was one of the kind of the annoying things too about the last 2 years is, like, people have been, like, harping on people for, like, not wearing a mask. But I mean, the reality is nobody wants to wear a mask. And, like, yeah, but I mean, shame on you guys for pushing the masks. Not you two, but shame on the media. Like, shame. Like, it's terrible what they have done. The abuse to all the children, the psychological damage to the children, to the point now, I was down in Legoland here in California yesterday, and, like, you're looking at 2 and 3-year-olds, like, wearing masks, and like, that means they've been, like, probably, like, this is their very formative years, and, like, to the parents, like, shame on you, parents, for doing that to your children. But I recognize, like, you're likely in a state of fear and making those decisions from a place of fear and hypnosis. I think there's a lot of healing that needs to happen, and a lot of people are going to need to go through, like, kind of almost like rehab to try and recontrol, their minds and their souls. And yeah, but I mean, we're going to see it all over the place. And also, like, people are all like, really flustered right now, and they're angry about, the mask mandates coming off, and we're seeing the teachers unions and, like, some of these fearful, authoritative teachers, like, who just, I don't know, feed off power, wanting to be able to do that. I mean, I remember being in school, it was like there are already so many rules, and now you want to put like a face covering over me, you want to restrict my breathing, like give me a break. So, I think a lot of conscious parents though are looking at, repealing or removing from their children from the system. I know I've made that decision, and and I believe strongly in that, but it comes with a large kind of like commitment, to actually be responsible for your children's education and assuring, that you surround them by, other awesome kids and good tutors, and, provide them with great experiences. But yeah.
So you say you're down in California right now?
Yeah, I'm in I'm in San Diego right now. My wife's down here. We're expecting a child any day now, and then we're going to transition over to Florida. Is our plan, and
That's absolutely amazing, and congratulations for sure.
well, thank you very much. And
It's a
yeah,
blessed
it's
thing to
been
have a
really
family.
amazing being down here too. Like California, a lot of people, like, I think, have some assumptions around California. I would definitely say that, like, LA, someone described it as Satan's armpit the other day. I don't really feel that. I feel like it is like the city of angels as well, but it's like going through a huge light dark battle. But there's definitely, like, they went full hook, line, and sinker into, like, just so silly. And, like, everybody, like, was drinking the Kool-Aid around the masks and then the shots. And whereas San Diego, it's like, I mean, just based on political leanings, it's more of a kind of Republican, pocket of California, a lot of military here. And there's, like, I've been part of a lot of kind of the freedom movement activations down here. And yeah, I mean, haven't worn a mask here. Only time was we had a miscarriage, and we had to go to the hospital, and that was, had to wear the mask for that. And then, other than a little bit of airplanes, but other than that, I've just been breathing and smiling the whole time, and you know doing what we can to be kind of civically engaged here. And I was in Canada in August of, or in June to August of 2020. And I remember, like, that was in, like, kind of the peak madness. And we got an RV and we drove all across America, and, like, California was under the spell. But then as we went more and more inland America, it was like people didn't care about it at all. And then, like, I remember being in Texas in May of 2020 at, like, a hot spring with like 1,000 people. It was awesome, like, just to be, after being in all this fear kind of state. And then we drove out, and then we continued, and as we got up closer and closer towards Canada, you could just feel, like, the energy shifting. And then to the point when I arrived in Canada, and it was like 14-day quarantine, or you could go to jail for 6 months and get $1 million fine if you break it. Like just so stupid.
That
And I,
is.
when I got there, my family were, like, terrified of us. Like, even my dad, who's, like, he's pretty awake. He was like, I'm just gonna, like, stay awake. And I'm like, Dad, come here. I'm like, come here. Bear hug. Like, no, like, no, we're, like, enough of this. But then to see, like, how deeply kind of embedded it got into everybody's psyche, that, okay, like, everyone is a threat to each other. And that was kind of the efficacy of the media's job, because without the media, nobody would know that anything was going on. So they'd, like, done a really great job of scaring the shit out of Canadians coast to coast, to the point where you won't even see your family and their kids who you haven't seen in over a year.
That's just the thing, right? I mean, everybody's pandemic experience was so different compared to others. I would say, me personally, especially over the past year and a half, I probably lived more than I have in like the past 10 years of my life. And I think that's a blessing to some degree, but I haven't really had the same problems with family as you had stated, with people being absolutely afraid of you. So I've been lucky in that regard. Where would you say would be like the worst place that you would have visited in that trip, fear-wise?
Oh, it was literally coming into Canada and like being in rural Ontario. Like, to be honest, it was like we got, like, my wife got, like, like, chased out of a grocery store, like, a small little town, generally, pretty cool. And that was really, really harsh to deal with. That had massive psychological impacts. But then we then we got out of there, and then we left Canada, and then we went back. Then we went to Whistler for the winter of last year. Again, it's like, we're not gonna let this, like, shut down our lives. So it's like, I would say the same thing, Brendan. It was like the last 2 years have been really amazing. Like, before that, I was kind of traveling a lot, doing a whole bunch of crypto stuff. It was, and like traveling back and forth between Canada because I had children everywhere, like in Ottawa and in California. So it's a lot of movement. And one of the blessings of what took place was, okay, I'm gonna spend more time, like, together, me and my wife, more time together, get a little bit more grounded, like, get in shape. In the very beginning, like, I was exposed to COVID through Sophie Trudeau, and like, okay, like, before anyone else, like the beginning of March, was like, okay, we're doing like this 14-day thing, and like we made a great experience out of that. And then I remember, like, by the end of it, I was like, this isn't making sense. And I saw a David Icke interview with Brian Rose. I was like, yeah, David, like, thank you for, like, making it exceptionally clear. And then in April, I made this video about, like, man, I'm like scared about, or I'm concerned that they're going to use this to take away all our rights and be the new 9/11, the new Patriot Act. And here we are, and they've done just that, introduced the Emergencies Act, which I believe they were planning to do no matter what. And they didn't get, like, Ottawa didn't give them the, the fear and bloodshed that they're kind of hoping for, and they couldn't provoke it enough. So they just did it no matter what. And, they brought in their troops and closed down the club that was the Freedom Convoy for 17 days, which was, like, just amazing and incredible. And I think a lot of people will remember, like, the Freedom Convoy for those last moments of, like, the riot police, like, the trampling and the kneeing and just, the butting and all that stuff. But, like, that was the end of it all. I think the message was served. Obviously, it was really clear that, our government doesn't care what you as a Canadian think, unless you agree with, wokeism mentality. They don't care. They're not down. They're not going to listen. They brought together scientists, doctors, experts from various fields, trying to facilitate a debate, a discussion around it. The government says, nope, we're not going to engage. And that comes down to the fact that the government can engage, because they're just reading a script and they don't have anything to back any of what they're saying up. Lies need censorship. Truth is open to debate. And so, our current government is peddling a bunch of lies. They're actively, committing crimes against humanity, against the Canadian people. There is mass medical experimentation. We've come to a segregated society. Incredible division amongst people has been sown. Fascism, I think, is the best way, when the government and the corporate kind of, the government, corporations, and the state merge together. This is tantamount to fascism. And the people are at the bottom of this pyramid, this hierarchical pyramid, and have no say. And yet, Justin would say that, well, I was voted democratically to be in this position. And, like, well, people didn't vote for anything that you're doing. They simply made a check mark on a piece of paper like, in the fall. And a couple years before that, they made a single check mark. And the mainstream media used an incredible amount of energy to mobilize people towards that singular vote. And somehow this represents democracy. There aren't referendums. I mean, they did like a cannabis, thing on the bill, but whatever. That was kind of, who cares about that? But we need more of those type of things. How about you ask? Should we do mandates? Should we do these different? Should we implement vaccine passports? Should we close our border to, people that are conscious about the dangers that this gene therapy injection presents? And being coerced into taking that, the risks are just way too high. And I am generally frustrated, and to watch my family relation has he's 17 or 18 years old, he's a superstar athlete, and he was in the hospital the other day with heart problems. And it's like, how dare you? That's just and I asked his mother, did that happen? Did you give him the shot? He's like, yeah, but let's not talk about that. So it's a lot of parents are going to have are going to struggle with denial in the fact that, or not be willing to to associate these issues. Same thing when I was in Florida. One of my dad's friends, his wife was in the hospital down here. She had blood clots all up in her hand, and was like we don't know what this is from. Did she get the jab? Did she get the booster? Yeah. It's well, that's probably what it's from. There's did you even think about that? We didn't even think about that. It's exactly. It's they've just been conditioned to this safety message, and everything that they're doing is for your safety and health. But the reality is, it's dangerous. And everybody, all the doctors and scientists who are coming out and saying that this is incredibly dangerous, they get canceled and they get attacked. And so there's a lot of intimidation. And even with journalists, I was talking to one of the major journalists who's a little bit on the open freedom side of this, but he's still working within it. And he's every single story I write, and it's they're more kind of free within the MSM. Every single story he'd write about a vaccine injury spiked. They just they're not willing to report it. So it's there's just a total vacuum within the public, within the mainstream sphere, about the havoc being reaped on Canadians. And that just again speaks to this fascistic agenda and all the conflicts of interest. It's horrible.
So your perspective is unique because, of course, Justin is your half brother. This must tear at you in a variety of ways.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's Justin has committed himself to this course of action and this path, and I think he may be compromised in some form or fashion, but I don't have any kind of evidence for that. But he's just acting out this role in this script, and I mean, he is not a free man. You want to talk about someone who has no freedom? Justin Trudeau has no freedom. He has prison guards around him at all times. Security guards around him at all times. He doesn't get to say anything off the cuff. He doesn't get to engage in open discussions. He's literally not even allowed to, I don't think, engage in open discussions. Everything that he does is likely monitored and filled. But and then also part of this mass hypnosis kind of concept is, I believe he honestly thinks that they know the best, and that the people don't know the best. And that stupid line he said the other day of the cynical populist, I swear he's referring to you, me, everybody in this space. Cynical populists have the easy answers. Just ignore this, stop all testing, stop all vaccinations, start an inquiry into the conflicts of interest that took place in this. Like, think about the tenets of what our democracy is based on and how we can start fixing that. Start thinking about, enforcing our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, maybe educating people about that, talking about healthcare instead of talking about our sick care system that, just pumps people full of drugs. And while it's publicly funded, that doesn't mean it's effective or efficient in any way, shape, or form. Justin, you never told anybody to go get exercise or go get sun, get vitamin D, get vitamin C. None of that. You never did any of that. Instead, you told people to stay at home, watch television, smoke pot, order Instacart.
This comes from somebody who's relatively fit. Like he's not a lazy guy.
Also know he wasn't at home. I mean, he's got Harrington Lake, which is it's an unbelievable place, and he's out there, I'm sure, doing stuff. He's not doing selfies running around. But that's the other thing, is Justin can't go anywhere anymore. He can't go out in public because people honestly are really angry and despise him. And we saw that during the last election. He couldn't go anywhere, and based on the way that our election works, it's a lot of the people who are really upset and have a lot of opinions and are really engaged on it. They were, they had to set up decoy rallies to try and fool the people, because there's no supporters that were actually coming out. His true blue supporters are staying at home, are masking up, listening to the CBC, etc., about what to do next. It's very compliant, it's very kind of anti-freedom, very anti-individual. They're just stuck in this kind of hypnosis. And I think that then it comes election, and it's okay, well, now there's a bunch of mail-in ballots all of a sudden, so now that's a new threat vector for potential corruption and attack, and undue influence to make the vote a fraud. But let's not even say, we don't even need to talk about that, because really utilizing the mainstream media and pushing people out. It's I look at my grandfather, 101 years old, amazing, he still votes. Does he go on the internet? Does he go on the internet and research policies and think about things? No. Does he really know what he's voting for? No. Is he voting liberal? Yeah. Why is he voting liberal? Because he votes liberal. Because he's always voted liberal. And that's why they they target those senior centers so hard, is get people out, we'll help facilitate those drives. And then same with within the public sector and the corporate sector, really mobilizing those groups to come out, make that one check mark, and then have trust in democracy. And they run on these platitudes that are we're gonna help the middle class. It's dude, have you seen what's actually happened? The average price of a home in Toronto, of a detached home in Toronto, is $2 million. $2 million. That's a $400,000 down payment. No Canadians can afford this. But it turns out BlackRock and Vanguard and Chinese investment funds are buying them up like crazy. So this you own nothing and we'll be happy kind of Great Reset plan is coming into fruition slowly. It's all happening incrementally. And Canadians are the ones paying the great price for it. And then I would also say too, another factor that he and the party, and I speak of Justin, Justin's he's just the chief spokesperson, but the party, what they're doing is all this free money too. So the CERB money, it's basically free money. It's basically you're bribing Canadians not to work, and then they were bribing businesses to take money to stay afloat. And a lot of these loans were kind of forgivable too, but then it's by taking them, it's you're going to then agree to enforce these radical kind of new mandates and regulations that you want to impose on society. And ultimately, and this we're kind of got me to this book called CanaDAO. So a DAO represents a decentralized autonomous organization. It is a new structure of project organization and governance. And looking at, there's the cover, how you return power to the people. That is the goal. How can we return power to the people? As Buckminster Fuller said, you can't fix the system by fighting it. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. So this current system of government, this Westminster model of government, was invented and implemented in Canada before we had electricity in Canada. It was implemented at a time when Canadians from coast to coast, huge country, how are we going to make regulations on a national basis? Well, let's appoint one representative from all these different little ridings, and they'll come to Ottawa for 6 months a year, and they'll represent the interest, and then they'll go back to their ridings for 6 months and gather feedback, and then rinse and repeat over and over again. And great, that worked then. But now 2022, we can send you couldn't send a message from Halifax to Ottawa very quickly then. It would take days, weeks potentially, but now you can send a message from Victoria to Halifax in a microsecond. It's the conditions have changed, the environment has changed. So why don't we look at changing our system? And with what happened in Ottawa of hundreds of thousands to potentially millions of people coming and participating over the course of 17 days, over 3 weekends in Ottawa, incredibly peacefully, high vibration, sharing, dancing, becoming civically engaged, sending a message, sharing, gifting amongst each other, being very expressive, having a lot of fun doing it all too, coming together, reuniting as Canadians and saying, look, we're not afraid, we're done with the lies and the BS. And then what is the government's reaction to it? Okay, let's stage a photo, let's smear this whole thing, let's use shitty words, and let's try and just do what we do and brand anything that we don't like as white or right and or Nazi. It's and the whole Nazi thing is really fun. They call it neo-Nazis. Not fun, but it's really symbolic. It's projection, because these guys, Justin is basically a Nazi. The part, and this isn't the 1930s kind of Hitler Nazi, but this is the fascism. He is everything he's saying is just pure projections. And what he says about the small fringe minority holding unacceptable views, that is honestly, I feel that is what he is, and he's what his and his party represent. A very small fringe minority that believe the few should rule the many, and that somehow that is the best case scenario for it.
It's interesting to hear you use that word, because I've been using it on here repeatedly. I absolutely agree with you. I think that's the way our government, that's the path our government has taken. It seems to sort of like a hybrid communistic, fascistic, but it's more fascism in my view than anything.
Yeah, and I think if you think about instead of a left-right paradigm, it's more of a circle. It's communism, fascism, and we're kind of right at the top, and it's and it's not about left-right, it's about tyranny versus kind of freedom. Right. And so I think, freedom is something that the people of Canada can unite around, except for those who are and those who are under deep hypnosis need to rehab and go through their own journeys and revelations, and and to kind of deprogram and and step back, or not step back, but cleanse themselves a little bit, get back into touch with what it is to be a human being.
Well, can I ask you something about that? Because I've been saying on this program here that mass formation psychosis doesn't just stop with the C-19. It carries over, and it carries over to Ukraine, and it carries over to whatever the next narrative is going to be, whatever the narrative sets its sights on next. That kind of doesn't help these people, because a lot of these people have already forgot C-19. They're all now looking for basically anybody who may be a Russian spy or espousing off Russian points now. So it seems like a lot of that's being forgotten, and replacement of the new thing.
Oh yeah, and it's like, it's now it's like, oh, the Freedom Convoy people are all a bunch of Russian collaborators and Russian supporters, and I feel like CBC even tried to like set that up with that ridiculous, segment that they did, or that line that fool said, but yeah, no, I mean, it definitely, like, that was really telling, like, in the final stages of the convoy, that it was like, okay, we're going to enact the emergency measure. We're going to do a two-part conference now. The first part is going to be the Emergency Measures Act, and the second part is going to be about Ukraine. And so they really did shift everybody over onto this, this new fear campaign, that instead of it being like, a pharma industrial complex, it became like, this is this new neocon kind of military industrial complex, and it's a very, like, polarizing situation. It's come to the point where now, like, Russians, like people of Russian descent all around the world, are part of the the unsavory, like fringe minority, unacceptable kind of class, and waiting, like being primed for cleansing and primed for purging. And it seemed like they were going to try and do this with, like, the unvaccinated as well, but doesn't seem like, but it just seemed like that they're always trying to look for some little group. And, like, what you were mentioning earlier, Rick, that Biden suggests that Putin has to go. Like, oh my gosh, like, it's so ridiculous. What if Putin suggests that Biden has to go? Or what if it's like, this is so ridiculous. Like, I mean, he doesn't have support of anybody. Like, he's a video of him eating pizza with the soldiers. Like, this is terrible. It's like, literally looks like he just belongs in a senior center, and it's really a shame. And I think it's a real slap in the face to all kind of, like, freedom loving, conscious, people of the world, that the commander in chief is, like, a dementia riddled old man who is not really capable. But it's like, that's kind of perfect for, like, as a Manchurian candidate. And the office is powerful, the man isn't powerful, but the office is powerful, and there's people that are behind the office supporting the office. It's just like, right, plain in your face, like, look at how ridiculous this has become. We're not even going to try anymore.
No, they're not. They're not even trying to hide it anymore.
I think you're actually touching on something extremely important there, and I think that and maybe you can elaborate a bit on that. And also, because you mentioned before that Justin is not free, it seems like he's being controlled by the party, by other forces around him. We see the same thing with Joe Biden. Can I just get you to comment on that and explain so that people can have a better understanding of what you mean by all of that?
Well, again, like, so I think it's happened all around the world in the last couple of years. Is the leaders are all kind of like, middle level managers, who've been put into positions of power, and they're not, like, the brightest, most enigmatic, intelligent, like, Renaissance folk. Instead, they're like, I would say, short of Putin, and I don't want to be like a Putin sympathizer, but like, I mean, you listen to him speak, and you actually listen to his transcriptions or his recordings, and, like, he's got a pretty good handle of reality, and he doesn't, and, like, he's more kind of like, Trump, in that it's not all scripted. Like Trump was that was kind of refreshing for a lot of people about Trump, was like, he would just speak from his kind of heart or gut or instincts, whereas, like, a lot of these politicians, like, it's just so scripted, and it's just so narrative driven, and, like, while it might appear like they're speaking off the cuff, it's like, they have a big book of policies, of talking points for every single line. It's like, the politics is an act, and a lot of these people are just actors, and it's living in fear of saying the wrong things because it might alienate this group or that group or this group or that group. So it's like, but core to their narrative is, like, speaking these, because within this pyramid, like, people think, people are at the bottom of the pyramid, like the general individuals are at the bottom, and then, like, they think that, you know, Justin is at the top of this pyramid, but many think that like they're at the top, and through elections and democracy, our influence that top of the pyramid. But the reality is we're in a global pyramid, and like, you know, maybe halfway up is where you get to like, you know, the likes of, you know, Justin and Joe and like, you know, Boris and Angela and Macron and Jacinda and Scotty down in Australia, like, you know, all these people, like, but they're being fed. The thing is, they're reporting to higher forces. There are groups above them, their own teams, their investors, like, you know, their patrons, the people who fund the campaigns that get them into the power, the lobbyists and the corporations that get them in power and support them in power. And then they have conflicts. And there's like, you know, there are real transparency issues and accountability issues within our governments around conflicts of interest. Like, you know, there needs to be an investigation into the the fake vaccine kind of creation, and like, you know, all the different parties that are a part of it, and the ties towards political figures and individuals within power. You know, the same thing as right now. Who's it? Russell Brand was saying, like, you know, don't you think it's a little bit messed up that, like, you know, a bunch of the U.S. House Congress members, like, they're all buying Raytheon and Boeing stocks, like, right before they are them going to fund massive spending to those companies? Like, is that not inherent? There's like this inherent conflict, a profit conflict, and like a money conflict of interest here that, like, it's just wrong. And it's like, you know, it's illegal and it's fraudulent, and like, you know, we like, you know, rational human beings believe that we have a system of justice in place that prevents this type of radical.
I think Nancy Pelosi got caught with her pants down on that one really badly. My understanding.
And will she, like, you know,
no.
find any justice
no.
out of this?
No.
And so, you know, and the same things happen here, and it's like looking, and I remember, like, and I mean, believe me, I have a unique perspective on this. When all this stuff went down, and it's like my phone never stopped, like, you know, getting all these messages from all these, like, people seeing this as a big money opportunity. Oh, tests, masks, PPE, masks, PPE, tests. It's like, ugh, gross. And like in the very beginning, I was like, okay. And also part of it was all, and you'll make this many points on all these deals, and you'll make this much money on all these deals. You'll make 10 cents, 25 cents per test. It's like, what? For just connecting you to him, you're going to give me 25 cents per all these tests? Not interested. Like, no, I'm not going to do that. And plus, like, you know,
so,
in the beginning,
make sure I understand that correctly. People were asking you to connect them to Justin Trudeau, and we're offering you a slice of the business dealing.
Yeah, I mean, this is how it works in like in sales and referrals in business, and like, you know, larger kind of campaigns. And again, I'm just was you know, in the beginning of seeking to like save people and help people, I was like, okay, this is interesting. But then I remember someone reached out with like, okay, we have a natural compounding solution that stops the cytokine storm, will stop anybody from needing to be ventilated. I was like, well, this is really interesting. Like, here's what you should do: send it to this person, this person, this person. I'm like, crickets, literally crickets. Like, you know, and that was really clear. Like the next day, he announced like $200 million for funding of vaccines. So, like, when the real, let's call these therapeutics, were kind of available, then, like, you know, it's no interest. The vaccine was the whole point of this whole thing. I think we know that really clearly. The health and wellness of Canadians was never a priority. Otherwise, they would have told people. If this was an actual pandemic, they wouldn't have had to, like, you know, use so much propagandistic messaging to convince people that it was a pandemic. Yeah, and I know we probably want to, like, you know, touch a little bit more about that, like, you know, that testing stuff. But dude, that shit was going on everywhere, like everywhere. And as the people are saying, we've got this, and like so many people like got distracted off of their good projects that they were working on, and all of a sudden became mask experts, PPE experts, testing experts, and all that shit was all coming from one region too. All is coming from Asia. Everything was just coming in. It's like all you needed to have was an Alibaba account and a couple connections and some float, and you could bring them in for $1 and sell them for $5. Like,
Well, I know people who did that. Yeah.
yeah.
Exactly.
And it was like, and again, but then when you're doing that, then it's like, then you're invested in it now. So you're going to support, even if it becomes clear that, there's something really wrong happening here, you're making money on it. So, that will do. And then I'd say also they got a lot of people like looking at this and like spending their time and energy, and the deals would never go through. It's like, you really think that they don't do you really think you got to come through me to get to him? Like, you blind? Like, that's not how way things work, like, to be honest, because you go through the lobbying companies, you go through the Health Canada. Like, you think like 3M isn't set up for this? You think Johnson and Johnson, you think Pfizer, you think like their networks of underneath, you think BlackRock and Vanguard were prepared for the massive PPE run that they themselves, using their media connections, instigated and perpetrated, and like pushed that whole narrative? Like, no, it's just they just took a bunch of people and they threw dollar signs up there and and gave them this illusion that they might be able to get rich off of participating in the beginning in helping keep people safe, but over time, I think it's really clear that it's all just a big scam. We all know that now.
I personally am day 6 COVID. Don't have
still alive.
Don't have.
And like, what's the difference between so Brennan? What's the difference between day 6 of COVID in 2022 and day 6 of a flu in 2017?
This is more of a cold. It started off more like a flu, but now it just feels like a cold.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's like, and
First
it's
day
also like
first
seasons
day,
are changing.
First day was bad.
First day was bad. I mean, I did.
Yeah.
I had like, I had on New Year's Eve, I had a fever that was like super, super, super intense. Like, it was crazy. The most like psychedelic dreams. Woke up the next day, and then I was like, felt better, went skiing. And then like 3 days later, I just lost my sense of taste and smell. Just gone, which was really bizarre. Like, just
I
gone.
haven't lost that yet, so I'm still.
I lost that, and then like and I'd say it's only probably maybe 75%. Can't really smell all that great anymore, or taste, which is weird, and that's never happened to me before. But again, everybody has different experiences with this, and it's like, how do you know you had COVID?
Somebody provided me with one of those test
so
kits that they give to like their kids before they go to school or whatever.
Right, and so how does that know that you have COVID?
I don't honestly know. But my brother had it.
And that's the thing.
My brother had it, and both two different. His test tested positive. Mine tested positive. I mean, I'm not going to go get a PCR at this point, because then that's just inviting Health Canada into your life, and I really can't be bothered with that.
Well, indeed, and it's also inviting some polyethylene glycate, medical instrument to rub up against your brain nose barrier, and that can have impacts as well, and who knows what's on those. But at the core, this whole thing is a giant case demic with the PCR tests, and now with with these, and based on what is how do you know it's testing for COVID-19? What is COVID-19? Because in 2017 with the flu, what would have happened had you taken that test? Probably get a positive result as well. And then all of a sudden, now we're in this realm of everybody's just testing. It's like all of a sudden I get sick and I go get tested, and it's a binary thing. It's like a pregnancy test, but it's a little bit different. So, yeah, it's like my kids are flying back to Canada. They got to go, or then their mother has to go get a test. Like, in order to do that, it's like she's not sick, she's not unhealthy, but like, to go and get tests, and all this costs money too. Like, in Canada, they just announced $2.5 billion for the spending to go buy more of these tests, and this is what's going to trigger these next waves, which would trigger the kind of recurrent media cycles of pushing and pushing and instilling this, and yeah, it's just.
Can I ask you about traveling back and forth across the border? Because I'm curious about that. It was my understanding that you had to be vaccinated, but or can you travel back and forth across the border and just do that with a negative test result, or what are the rules surrounding that now?
I don't know. I'm not a border savant in terms of the rules. But I think I think for Canadians, like getting back into Canada, like I think you can like just show them a negative test. They say they want you to have the proof of experimental gene therapy injection, but I know that within Canada, once you're in Canada, it's difficult to travel around, but it's like more difficult to travel inside of Canada than it is to enter America. I think you can just drive across the border into America right now. I don't even think you need a test. Again, there's a big difference between the Canadian side of the border and the American side of the border. When you go in dealing with the Americans, you're dealing with the Americans. They're like, depending where you are, you're going to deal with different kind of people. And at the end of the day, it also depends on who you're encountering, on that journey. Yeah, but I mean, theoretically, if you're a Canadian outside and you want to come home to Canada, like, is there any way that they can tell a citizen you're not allowed to come back into your own country? It's like they can not let you on the plane. I suppose and that's why I got an RV, to enter into Canada in 2020, because I just didn't want to risk having my family separated at at the airport by an unconscious airline agent.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't crossed the border myself since all of this has started. I used to go back and forth quite a bit, but I've just avoided all of that. Of course, I haven't been injected, so I can't get on a plane or a train, which is, I think, wrong.
Yeah, that was crazy.
Yeah, and it's gonna. I mean, I feel like it's gonna change. Like, it's gotta kind of change at some point. It's like, we're not doing this out of like, we're not. I mean, I got 4 kids, 5 kids. I'm like, I got to make sure, like, I'm aware of fear and the way that fear is used against people. I'm also conscious of danger. And when you see, like, that experimental injection is dangerous. And like, I know other people, like, I think a lot of people, especially those like within the business circles, like, in the power circles, they were offered very early access to batches, and like the word was, take this now, like, here you go, this is your early special access batch. Like, so what do we think that is? That's
Guinea pigs.
It's just saline. No, it's not even guinea pigs. It's just saline.
Saline.
It's like, yeah, it's like it's they're nothing active. Like, this is the lowest risk possible. It's like, you don't like, same with the nurses and the doctors and law enforcement too. It's like, okay, here's your curated bottles of saline, maybe with some, but they're not going to give like the real full-on stuff. And that's the other thing. It's like, we're paid for 110 million or 500 million doses of the good crap, and you're telling me you're giving me half of what you're giving me is saline? Like, being robbed here.
Exactly.
That's all like that's hypothetical, and these are just kind of ideas, but
wouldn't surprise me.
No, and I'd say that those who get sick are the ones that go to just shoppers, to get it. Like, go to the the local dispensary.
Well, it begs the question. I mean, we've all seen the video with JT and Sophie. They're at the pharmacy to get it, and the nurse, with one hand, shoots the needle into the upper arm with one hand. Usually you need to pinch and then jab. And there's this nurse watching it and being like, yeah, that's totally not how you do that. That is entirely wrong, and yada yada yada. It wouldn't surprise me if people like that are given just saline.
I think that, like, within the distributions, like if I was Pfizer, like, great, like, remember in the beginning, it's supposed to be like -70, like storage units, like all that talk, like how difficult it was going to be to transport. What happened to that story? They all have super sub-zero, like, they carrying, like, you think all the pharmacies, all the Walgreens, all the shoppers are set up with that? Like, hell no. Like, and there's like, where are the quality controls? And it's like, and what about the adverse reactions and the fact that there are a lot of adverse reactions? And shouldn't there be a little bit more tempered, like, like awareness around the fact that, children are suffering from heart attacks and heart complications? And, like, shouldn't that be enough to, like, just say stop and, like, and reflect? Like, there's clear and present danger here to Canadians, to society. And, but no, they just kind of continue. And it's like, there's no look into the fact that this is an ongoing, medical experiment, and, that people are being kind of questioned. And there's very little Q&A on the, the individual, like, batches. There many people are saying there's some batches are more dangerous than other batches, and I wonder why that is. It's like, what are the ingredients in all of them? And then, then you have the people, then you have the doctors who are looking into the blood of those who have taken these shots, and they're alarmed, and then they speak out, and they get canceled, and they get delisted and shut down. So it's like, this is how, if there was ever a genocide taking place, this is what it would kind of look like in the 2022 fascist globalist kind of state of the earth, where, big corporates have so much power and media have so much power to shut down and silence, a narrative, and people are getting sick, and there's no investigation. And when the media, like as mentioned before, when they won't report on the instances and the tragedies that are taking place, like, and there isn't really, any awareness or even, like, declaration that we're going to make sure this is safe. Instead, you're like, they just bash VAERS. Like, this is supposed to have, VAERS is there as a requirement based from the government to the vaccine industry to make sure that they're not injecting us with poison. It's like, I heard somewhere that in Washington, like, in Washington, D.C., Pfizer employs 22 lobbying firms. 22 lobbying firms, not 22 lobbyists. 22 lobbying firms. So they've got everybody. When you have that kind of money, you can just buy up all the lobbying firms. If you invest in all the lobbying firms, you get, name some of them, like Hill and Knowlton, like the Sussex Strategy Group in Canada, like, I don't know, there's a bunch of them. But it's like, all those guys, they're all just service agencies. They're people working for their dollars. You get a big ass client like Pfizer come along, yeah, we'll push your stuff. We're not going to question it. We know you want these sales. And then, and then also in the past too, when big pharma, they get caught for killing people, because that's usually what fines for them is, they get fines. They don't go to jail. Nobody goes to jail. There's no, like, accountability. There's no real responsibility that, the people behind at the board level, like, face for it. Instead, they pay a fine, a huge fine. And that fine is like, if Pfizer was like, here, U.S. government, here's $1 billion, like, before the fine, that'd be considered a bribe. But because the government asks them for the $1 billion, then it's totally legit. So it's like, gotten to the point where the governments are actually kind of relying on that fine bribe money from the pharmaceutical industry and it's just part of this cycle. So, all this to say, this is the state of this bullshit government system that we're running in that does not represent the people. It is political politicians working for the interests of their parties, which represent corporations and unelected and non-sovereign objectives and influence and ideas, and they don't listen to the Canadian people. So let's build something new. This system's not working, so let's start thinking about how can we make something that works. We're in this age where we can send a message from
I want to talk about that, especially in relation to your book, and I would like to just get these two questions out of the way, and then we'll
right,
kind of get into that, because I'm really curious about this. How has things with the family been since you've come out publicly? And secondly, are you on a CSIS or Canadian government watch list of some kind at this point now?
So I'm really good with my with my father, and with my mother, and I haven't talked in too long, and I've sent her messages of love. Within my immediate family, with my wife and her family, all's good. Within my greater family, many messages of support, no negativity whatsoever. But with Justin, I haven't spoken to Justin in a long time. Then I would like to discuss this and help this, but not happening at the moment. And in terms of whether or not I'm on any list, I don't know. I don't have any. I don't have an NFT that says I'm part of the CSIS list, but I would imagine so. Why? Come on.
Well, if you weren't before, you are now that you're on here.
Well, and for years I've been speaking all about decentralization, all about systems, and I was speaking all about 9/11 and what a crock of shit that was, and and the wars, and all the madness, and warning about a lot of these things and discussing it and looking at additional solutions. So yeah, I'm probably on a list, but I'm not going to focus. I'm just going to speak my truth. I'm not hiding anything. I'm not. The thing is, how I believe in security and safety is if you're open about everything, you're safe. If you're Julian Assange and you're holding on to 1,000 terabytes of classified information, that you're the one in control of, yeah, that's very dangerous. So by being open and truthful and speaking about everything and not hiding anything, then it's what are you gonna do? I'm not breaking any rules here. I'm not breaking any laws. I'm just
yeah, we've learned recently that you don't really have to break any laws for them to maybe make some up or what have you, right? So
exactly, and if they do that, it's it's like the Streisand effect, though, which we've seen kind of happening and playing out. It's they try to do this, it backfires, and it backfires. So I think by it was Uber was a good example. They were initially called Uber Cab. That was what Travis launched Uber as, and then the cab authority came after them, and it gave them a ton of press, and then they dropped the cab and became Uber, but they piggybacked off all that press of the cab drivers coming at them, and ultimately that was one of their big launches into their early success. Similarly, by coming after the convoy and coming after people's bank accounts, they're going to encourage people to look for alternatives and realize that, hey, instead of holding on to cash or keeping deposits with banks, maybe I look at crypto, or maybe I invest that money into real estate, or into food, or into growing, or into security, or into anything that's the end of the day, cash is good, and it's an important thing, tool to have, but you don't have all your money, everything in cash, because if shit hits the fan, cash isn't going to do anything for you.
No.
Right. So you do outline some ideas to give power back to the people in your book, and you seem to think that we can use technology, the internet, maybe blockchain technology, to achieve some of these goals.
Yes, I do. Um, so I've been like deeply involved within the crypto kind of industry and like Bitcoin industry since 2013. And one of always the promises of it has been like, if we can do decentralized cash, like why can't we do decentralized voting? And I think, 11 years on that we are ready for it and that the tools exist and the awareness of Bitcoin and other coins. So like Bitcoin represented like cash and like an alternative to the fiat dollars. And then we saw DeFi arise, which offers alternatives to a lot of financial products and financial institution products. And then we saw NFTs rise, which are alternatives to identity, for one thing, but also memberships, titles, ownership, stakes, and different things, certificates, warranties, art, collectibles. There's many, many things they can do. And then we've seen most recently the rise of the DAOs. So DAOs are decentralized autonomous organizations, and there are organizations. It's a way for people and projects to come together and collaborate instead of registering with the Ontario with Corporations Ontario or Industry Canada or some jurisdiction. Instead, you write a smart contract and you say, okay, if you put like X Ethereum or Bitcoin, or you do something, you get some tokens in this. And by having tokens in this, you can then submit proposals and you can vote on proposals that happen within the organization. And there can be a treasury that's associated to that, so that based on the proposals that are submitted, the funding will occur. And it all happens like, in a digital layer governed by smart contracts and like, decentralized tech, but ultimately managed and on by people. And so if we think about what happens in the Canadian Parliament, it's like, okay, we have 300 and I don't know 63, I think is the number. I should probably know that, but the number of kind of MPs that there are, and like that these are 363 people that each have one token effectively, and they vote on, they get to submit proposals in the form of legislation and bills, and then everybody votes on it, and if it passes, it goes into action, and there's some spending associated to it, and if it doesn't, it doesn't. And so that's what it works. And so, but thinking about like the concept of a DAO, it's like, well, why do we have 363 people? How about we have 38 million people? And we give everybody the opportunity to participate on the voting for these things, but also on submitting proposals too, because not that many like real deal innovative kind of proposals actually make it to the House of Commons. Instead, it's like it's these politically scrubbed initiatives that get there, and they're mostly coming from lobbying industries,
Or the ones that want to step on you.
or the ones that want to step on. And then and a lot of times they're just creating more laws. It's just like giving them more power, more dominating control over people's lives. And like there's certain things like if 95% of Canadians thought income tax was a total scam, and they voted to get rid of income tax in favor of, say for example, a seamless consumption tax, that didn't put any liability on businesses or contractors, and it showed, and like and you could prove that based on modeling or whatever forecasting that there wouldn't be a net loss of revenue, but we could do that. Like that kind of proposal never make it into the House of Commons. Like income tax is one of their sacred chains that they hold on to keep people enslaved. So
Lots of questions coming from people. We'll get to some of those in a moment. Lots of comments. But you suggest that this isn't just for voting. We could be using this technology to give people more of a voice on all issues, right?
Yeah,
As a government
absolutely.
remains in power and give deeper meaning, I think, to the word democracy.
Indeed. And it's like, when it's moving away from government, which is like this concept of people controlling you, and moving more towards like liquid democracy, where like, ultimately people are in control of their own destiny to a certain degree. And one of the common kind of questions that I've been receiving is like, well, what about like mob rule? And it's like, what if Canadians, for example, in a very extreme case, were like all unvaccinated people should be murdered, like they should be brought out and killed. And
Well,
it's like,
it'd be given a cuter name than that. It would be something like
sure, but
silence.
like let's use that example, and let's say that like the majority of Canadians voted for that. This is where like our charter comes in and the rule of law comes in. So there needs to be like a reference towards the Constitution or the charter rights, or like the legal system, to assure that that the rights of the individuals are being protected with any proposals that are being made. And that's the way our system currently works, and it's supposed to work. And
Supposed to, yep.
And so it's not like we need to abolish that kind of idea, but let's upgrade the systems using the technology to fast forward from pre-electricity age to blockchain, internet, decentralized Web3 age that we're in now, and start thinking about this. And like maybe all Canadians don't need to be like thinking at a federal level on decisions. Like does the federal government have too much power, like as a starting point? I'd say a lot of people would probably say yes. And it's like what's the role of federal government? Honestly, it's like, well, it's like to connect the provinces and to protect our borders, and I don't know, like look at some federal issues, but it's become very large as it is now. But ultimately, like you look at the provinces, and then you look at the municipalities, and encouraging more discussion. So if I'm in Ottawa, I should be able to basically be able to be civically engaged in at the the city level, the provincial level, and the federal level. And given where we are with technology today, like we have data streams coming out of all these different houses. So it wouldn't be that hard to create like a shadow ledger right now that could be blockchain certified or whatever, that makes it in the form of like an app that's like, how do you feel about this? Because this brings us to another section, which is polling. Like the polling industry is corporate industry, like where corporations and political parties hire the polling firms to get the intended results that they want, and then those like polls dictate policy and media sentiment and public sentiment. And so I think like by even setting up alternative polling systems that aren't just inherently riddled with conflicts of interest and political leanings, that we can start getting a better idea of where Canadians like views on particular positions really lie. Because like I think like on one end you've got the political spectrum where they feel like they want to be, and you have the Canadian, like the real Canadian consensus or feeling. And I think if we knew what that was a little bit more, it would help bring them a little bit closer. So I'd say that's one of like the like these kind of innovative initiatives that I would like to see somebody out there make. Is it's basically take all the feeds from all your local legislations, find a way to like certify where a person is, and give people the ability to vote, and share their expression on it. Enabling commenting would be great too, and discussion on these. Being able to be informed about what is actually being voted on, I think, is really important too, and having debate before the vote, like in an open arena, not in a politically scrubbed like House of Commons where free speech doesn't really exist. We saw that with Colin Kerry asking about the WEF. Like, no, don't talk about that. So
We couldn't quite actually hear you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then Charlie Angus stands up in the House and goes, "Point of order, Mr. Speaker, you're not allowed to talk about that." I thought you couldn't hear it. Oh my God, what a crap show.
Total crap show. And Charlie Angus, you're just a shame on you. Shame on you.
So you're quite involved with crypto, and I'm interested on your views with regard to how secure it is. And there was some thought with the Freedom Convoy that when people were donating cryptocurrency that the government wouldn't be able to get it. But I saw a story last week where they indicated police, government, the authorities, somebody went in and I think they were able to seize the cryptocurrency that was donated.
Yeah. So, well, GoFundMe proved to be a total corporatist, trap. And then Give, Send, Go, which was freedom-loving crowdfunding platform based in the States, got hacked, and then there was a court injunction against them, and they got attacked after 2 very successful campaigns. And then there was the Hong Kong HODL group put on by some Bitcoiners, and then they raised $1.5 million, and I think they distributed most of it out. But then one of the key holders, so it was the funds for that $1 million. So with Give, Send, Go, or with GoFundMe holds all the money until they distribute it, and they decide to distribute it. Give, Send, Go holds on the money until they decide to distribute it. With the Bitcoin fundraiser, the organizers of that in a multi-signature wallet each had a key to hold on and then to distribute the funds. So, all the authorities needed to do was go, get those key holders, or if they can, identify the key holders, and then go get them and say, okay, send the money to our government account. We're going to steal it from you, or seize it from you. And, I think one of the guys, Nobody Caribou, I think it was his name on Twitter, he wasn't even charged with anything. They didn't charge him but they came and stole the Bitcoin. It's just mass intimidation that took place there. Now, alternatively, had the truckers themselves just had QR codes for their own wallets that they controlled, anybody could have donated to them directly. If they had a DAO set up where, okay, we're going to verify all the truckers' addresses and put them into this laundry list, and then every time one Bitcoin comes in, it'll be split out and sent to all these different people, and that could be decided by the DAO. And then as soon as it happens, the money just gets sent out like that. We also saw as a result that a bunch of addresses were kind of blacklisted by exchanges, that were related to that. Well, the nature of Bitcoin and crypto is you can switch from one address to another. I'm not sure if they don't understand how wallets work, but you can get many, many different addresses, and you can move your coins around, and they're mixing services and there are swaps just by when you move from one currency to another. There's a lot of kind of privacy that is gained by doing that. But ultimately, I think what happened was with the coming after the bank accounts and by seizing people's bank accounts is they really scared a lot of Canadians. And, I was talking to someone who was pretty senior, and they're from one of the banks, and they're like, we saw so many senior citizens coming in and taking out massive amounts of cash. They're literally a bank run was started. And it wasn't because they didn't trust it. It's because they've seen history before, and they know okay, get it before it's gone. So if there's any risk out there, and this is money, and this is retirement money, I'm gonna go withdraw $10 $10,000 a day, and also realize that, oh look, there's limits to how much I can actually take out of my own money. So all of a sudden the nature of the financial beast becomes a little bit more and more clear to people. And I think again, this is where this you didn't work with the GoFundMe, then you didn't work Give, Send, Go, and then it didn't work exactly effectively with the Hong Kong HODL, but Bitcoin still works. And so, like, everybody go download Edge Wallet, like self-custody wallet, multi-currency wallet, allows you to swap between currencies, allows you to buy gift cards with crypto, doesn't require any identity information when you sign up, just username and password. They don't know who you are. Like, I remember the Canadian government asked Edge Wallet, can you shut down, these users? And they're like, no, we can't. And like we can't, and even if we wanted to, we can't, because that's the way that our tech works, is we don't know. And it's designed this way for a reason. It's because all of Bitcoin is meant to protect privacy and access, and from censorship and from coercion.
So we've seen in Ontario, Binance is no longer operating in Ontario because the Ontario Securities Commission came down on them from a regulatory perspective. So they're not allowed to operate in Ontario. We're seeing talk that the federal government wants to regulate and I think tax crypto. Will this be successful? Is this undermining confidence in cryptocurrency?
I don't think it's undermining confidence, but I think it's just going to continue to push people to innovate and build decentralized services and decentralized exchanges. So there's a lot of decentralized exchanges right now where you can swap one coin for another without needing to go through Binance. Binance is a centralized exchange. It, like, you deposit your money with them, you get balance with them, then you can trade within their system. They hold on to massive custodial wallets, that they're responsible for. And when they do that and they enable financial interactions on behalf of other people, then they fall under financial regulatory purview. And so they have certain kind of requirements and reporting requirements to do. Binance also has like a ton of tokens on their platform, some of which frustrate securities regulators because they may be deemed securities. And so, like, they're, and Binance is like, we're not going to like, our business is huge. We're not going to necessarily like, spend a ton of time and effort dealing with some sort of like, crazy bureaucratic regulatory body in Canada, when, all any Canadian needs to do is spin up a VPN and open up an account from a different, like, pretend they're in a jurisdiction. They can basically use the service, or they can just use a decentralized exchange and engage with that. So more and more we're seeing decentralized services pop up, and and there's still a bunch of centralized, but like a lot of the really big ones like Binance that has a ton of coin offerings on it, like, they're a little bit challenged. I know like Coinberry, I've worked with them in the past. They're out of Ontario. They went through, because they're a Canadian exchange, like they spent the time to deal with the OSC and get approval from them. So like, they're doing that. If people wanted to come and they wanted to tax the crypto, it's like, well, they just need to, get those data streams from like, if they can, from the private companies, and go after that. And honestly, they want that, but I think they've got enough Canadians fooled into just giving in Canadians just willfully giving away their money every year to the government, even though the government just seems to print money like it's going out of style, and like really I don't think it would be even that big of a line item if they just removed income tax altogether.
Yeah, it has. Well, it is out of control, the printing and I find it hard to believe, like, 15 years ago, I had a job at, like, a Taco Bell making, like, $6 an hour. Like, can you imagine from now? And it's like, where have we been and where we are going? And things are going to be so expensive. It's not going to matter what minimum wage is set at. It's not setting us up for success at this point.
No, and that's why it's like, that's why we really need to, like, focus on value creation. And like, if you're working as like, for somebody else and like entirely dependent on somebody else or the government, like if you're relying on the government right now for your money, like you gotta like stop that, like, and like, focus on getting yourself unstuck and where you can like legitimately create value by doing something that's productive within your own self and within your own being. And that's something like I've kind of given a great deal of thought to, especially within our public sector. Like, for example, CRA, like, it's a totally useless organization, completely useless. It adds no value to Canadians whatsoever. It does employ a ton of people. Like, it employs a lot of people. So
for our U.S. and other people around the world, CRA is Canada Revenue Agency.
yeah, they're like the
Tax.
IRS of Canada.
Yeah.
And so they're like, it's a really big, it creates a huge headache for a lot of Canadians. The revenue from tax is probably just a little bit marginally higher than the cost of collecting all that money through the CRA. But ultimately, like, all these people, they're people who are doing these jobs, and like, they're on pension lines. It's like, how can we, and like beyond CRA too, looking at other organizations, Agriculture Canada, Health Canada, Transport Canada, like looking at all these big public sector things. Like through technology, we can do things much more effectively and efficiently, and we're not necessarily going to need this massive bureaucracy and all these jobs to be there. So how do we transition people into like, in like motivating people to leave these roles, and like, on their own accord, ideally. Like, within Google, they have like, a whole like, they want people to leave Google at some point. Like, start your own project and leave. In Canada, the government is do the same thing. Like, if you're passionate about something, find that, go do it. Like, get out. Because like, just working within it because like, it's a job or it's a paycheck. Ultimately, there's like, when we think of it from a macro point of view, there's no value add towards it. It's just kind of bleeding our whole system. So like, but we got to be conscious about all these souls and all these people who are relying on it. And so it's like, is if like, there isn't a good argument for like, a universal accessible income, or some basic like some little basic amount that can help people. But I think if it's too high, then people won't participate in like the economy, and then you're going to see kind of shortfalls. But I don't know, this is a kind of a complicated complicated direction that we're getting into. And
Yeah, it is complicated, and I'm going to be honest with the whole world here. I'm a total moron when it comes to Bitcoin. Like, I just like way over my head.
Okay, so I'd say like, dude, like, take a second, download Edge Wallet, and
Yeah.
put up your QR code, and I'll just send you some Bitcoin right now. I'll just send you just a little bit, because it's like email. Like, it's really, it's like email. It's instead of sending a letter, you're sending money. It's a way to put cash in an envelope and make sure and know that it's going to arrive on the other side. And like email, probably didn't understand email all too well, like, when you first heard about it. But as soon as you sent an email and received an email, you're like, okay, I get it. And this is the same thing with Bitcoin. It's like, just by actually using it a little bit, you'll realize. And like, you'll start going through, they call it like orange pilling. You'll start going through like the motions, and you can never unlearn it. And you'll see like, oh, it's like, okay, so anybody can send it, but then how do I turn it into dollars? Well, you can use one of the exchanges like Coinberry or Coinbase or Binance or whatever, then get it into your bank account. But then you're like, oh, but what if instead I just kept the Bitcoin, and instead of like, what do I just paid other people with Bitcoin? It's like, yes, exactly. When we start just paying other people, then we can start becoming less and less reliant on the existing financial infrastructure, and start realizing this parallel economy, this parallel system. And it's like, well, I don't like the dollar. I don't like the volatility of Bitcoin because the price goes up and down. It's like, well, there's stable coins, which are pegged to the value. So it's like, okay, if you want to hold on to this value losing currency, then sure, be pegged to that. And it's like, well, I have it, but I've got it, but I've got a bunch of it, but I don't want to sell it, but I need some money. It's like, there's anywhere I can get like a loan against it. Like, yeah, you can get a loan against it. That's what DeFi is called, decentralized finance. So, you can utilize your Bitcoin as collateral to take a loan out against that Bitcoin. And then when you get money back in, you pay the Bitcoin back, and you pay the loan back, and you gain access to all your funds again. So, and you don't need to ask anybody for permission for that, which is really amazing. Whereas if you think about like a house, you go to a mortgage company, you're like, I have this, I own my house straight out. They're like, oh, great. It's like, okay, we'll give you, it's $1 million house. Okay, we'll give you $700,000. We'll give you a 5% rate. And it's like, but now they're going to be the ones holding it. And until you pay them all that money back, then they effectively own your house. But you have to get a permission from the bank and the mortgage company. Whereas in the decentralized world, the crypto world, you don't need permission from anybody. It's just like there are services that allow you to engage in these deals. But I would highly recommend, like as a start, like I recommend Edge Wallet. I know the team really well. It's a really good, simple, easy to use wallet. Comes like, it's a pretty qualified recommendation. It's a great place to start. You can literally like put a QR code in the bottom left corner here of this show. Like you can make a wallet, like, you and Rick can have a multi-sig wallet that it's like, okay, any donations come in, if we want to spend this money, we both have to agree to spend the money, and we'll move it that way. And you could have a multi-sig. And like, for example, I could be a third signer, and anytime you want to move money, it requires 2 of 3 people to sign off on it. And I'll just be silent. I never have to do anything because you guys will be able to sign off. But in the case that Rick loses his phone or loses his key, then you can always, Brendan, you can come to me and say, Kyle, Rick lost his key. Call Rick. Rick, did you lose your key? Yeah, I lost my key. Like, okay, great. And then you guys set up a new wallet. We move all the funds to a new wallet. So this is like how digital money can work.
And so, in regards to manufacturing these coins, what is it that they're manufactured of that allows them to retain a value? Like
great question. So Bitcoin. So there's only going to be 21 million Bitcoin. They're like the whole monetary policy was laid out in the very beginning of how it would work. There's only going to be 21 million. There's 19 or 19 million that have been created. So there's only ever going to be 22 million left. And the new manufacturing or minting of the new currency comes as a reward to the computer network for securing the network and processing the network. So every 10 minutes, on average, every 10 minutes, one computer somewhere in the world solves the Bitcoin problem or question. And then it's really hard to solve the problem. It's really easy to verify the answer. So it's like, everybody, and it's basically like all these computers are using energy to basically run a password hacker that is just throwing answers at the question. And until it comes back with a true versus a false, they just keep guessing. And on average, and the way the algorithm's designed is that approximately every 10 minutes, one computer will solve it. And and the computer that solves it gets 6.25 Bitcoin right now, which is like close to let's say $250,000, $300,000 every 10 minutes. And those are the new coins. And it's not one computer. There's literally, Bitcoin mining has become an industrial thing where it's literally warehouses and miners, the computers, they work together and they say like, if you win, we'll mine together. You'll provide 50% of your power. I'll provide 50% of my power. If one of us wins, we share it. So there's this agreement amongst miners that kind of lowers the risk for everybody. But that's effectively kind of how the production of it comes into play. You could go and fork Bitcoin and call it Brendan coin, and change the schematics on it, and it could start running immediately. But it won't have any value because what gives it value is the market of people buying and selling it. And so the market has determined that Bitcoin right now has a value of like $55,000 Canadian per one Bitcoin. And that doesn't mean you need to have $55,000 in order to acquire some Bitcoin. Bitcoin is divisible to 8 decimal places. So there's actually there's 100 million Satoshis, which is the Satoshi is the smallest unit of Bitcoin, named after Satoshi Nakamoto, who is the anonymous, pseudonymous, unknown creator of Bitcoin.
Okay.
I hope that helps.
Yeah, it does pack it down a little bit for me.
Well, I'm kind of familiar with doing this. It's been something I've been doing for a very long time, of introducing people to it and showing how it works. And it's one of these new models. Like, instead of trying to fight the financial system, like, this is one of these new models that can make it obsolete. So it's like, I encourage, and there's this saying, like, not your keys, not your coins. If you use Binance and you put all your money into Binance and then something happens to Binance, they get hacked, like, you don't have the keys. They're holding on to your money. It's just like a bank. If they have all their money in a vault and it's not insured and they get robbed, like, you're stuck holding a piece of paper, an IOU. That might be worth something or it might not be worth something. But that if you have your cash, you have your cash. So that's the same thing with crypto. It's like with Edge Wallet, like, you're in control of your keys. Your wallet holds all the keys for the different blockchains. Back to the email analogy, your public address is like your email address. You can share it to anybody. All they can do is send money to it, and they can also look up the wallet and see if there's any money in it and any transactions that have happened within it, which is interesting. But then, as your private key is the password that lets you move the money from that address to another address. And the way the wallets work, though, every time you receive money into one address, like, it'll generate you another address. So there's thing called HG wallets.
So we can find more freedom through the blockchain in these ways, but there's also concern that a more digitized society, through government digital currencies and vaccine passports and a social credit system, that this kind of technology might oppress us as well. What are your views there?
Great question. And I remember, in April, May of 2020, seeing something put on by the government, I don't know, from the digital identity societies, saying like, "Oh, Bill Gates, vaccine passports. This is a great idea." I'm like, this is a terrible idea. But this is where this tech can go as well. And the CBDCs, the central bank digital currencies, I want to be real clear. Those are not Bitcoin. Those are not going to be like Bitcoin. Those are going to be like Amazon dollars. Those are going to be like Disney dollars. Those are going to be, you register at the front gate for Disneyland, Disney World, you get your wallet that allows you to hold on to money, and then but Disney ultimately can pull money or add money to it as they see fit. And you can be turned off. They could potentially take fines from you, but no, they're gonna they're gonna sweeten it up by saying we'll give you free money by basically using this service, or potentially give you an interest rate. But it's not going to be a blockchain. It's not going to have open APIs. Likely won't have open APIs, and it'll be it's a centralized. It's the first word, central. It's going to be centralized. They'll have power over the way it works, and it is a threat to your financial freedom. It might work well. I mean, it could, and honestly, they could work well with Bitcoin. It's like, but at the end of the day, it's like, I choose Bitcoin, or I choose another crypto, or I choose a basket of cryptos. I don't believe in centralization. I don't believe that the world should have $1, should have a one world currency. I don't believe that the world should have a one world government. I don't believe that we need that this befits the people of the world. And that's why I don't even like the idea of Bitcoin being like, the one world currency. But man, I don't like that. That's probably a terrible idea. I don't like the idea of Bitcoin. Like, to be honest, like, people, some of my friends probably take a disagreement to this, but I don't really like the idea of Bitcoin as like, a wealth generation, like just buying some Bitcoin and sitting on it and it'll go up in value. Like, that worked really well for a bunch of people. And I know a lot of people that worked really well for. They didn't do anything. It was just like, basically a lottery token. And it worked. And it changed a lot of people's lives for the better. So thank you, Bitcoin, and thank you for everything. And that was predicated on greed, as like, one of the ways that Bitcoin kind of distributed and reached kind of, awareness was based on greed of people in seeing that, look, this technology can, by getting in early, it'll go up in value. And what it meant was a lot of people started buying Bitcoin and holding on to Bitcoin, but not really using it. I like to use it actually, like, and people are like hodl, which is like, I don't know. Some people say it stands for hold on for dear life, but it's just like also like, this euphemism just to say like, just hold on, don't do anything. It's just like a checking account, just hold on to it. But that kind of negates the original vision of Bitcoin, which is a peer-to-peer electronic cash system, and it enables us to move value. Like, if you just show me your code, I can send you value. You can send it back instantly. Like, this is a wholesale innovation, but by adding like this speculative kind of commodity, this price big component to it, it changed the dynamics a little bit, and I don't think it's been like as readily used in commerce as it could be. But that's all good. That's changing. The awareness. More people are holding on to it now than ever, and I think as we start using it, in daily life and within communities as a parallel economic system, like, we'll realize the values of it more and more. And I think as we start like, decommodifying society away from everything being about profits and dollars and more into value, quality of life, making sure we're all fed and eating healthy food and we're healthy, and we're being productive and living fulfilling lives where we love what we do and we do what we love. And obviously there's lots of challenges in lives, but that we have support systems around us to take care of one another. We move into this digital golden age, as the title of one of my previous books. I feel like we're getting there. And one of the things about this whole COVID thing was this was kind of a necessary chaos in order to shake things up a little bit. And things have definitely been shaken up, and a bunch of like dark actors with nefarious agendas are out there. And if we focus too much on them and what they're trying to do, we're just going to give power to that. So instead, like, let's focus on what do we want? What can we build? And this isn't just like, optimistic pie in the sky thinking. It's literally like, what do you want? Like, what's a better way? Because we should start building consensus around, what does a just Canada look like? What is, like, what's the purpose of government? Like, have qualified discussions, start having debate and putting challenges out there, because like collectively, the people of Canada are really, really intelligent, and we're capable of doing a lot. And despite like, what Justin thinks or what the parties think, like, the people should not be taken lightly, and their voices and their power, like, is at the root of everything. Let's honor that. Let's embrace that, and let's co-create like the society that we like, aim to see. And let's invite others to connect in creating this, and let's like, just start building and like try things out. Like, being afraid of failure shouldn't be a reason not to try, because you can't succeed unless you try. So it's like, let's try. And if it's like, man, yeah, an alternative system to this Westminster system of governance, like, we should definitely try that, because otherwise we're just going to deal with this same old thing. So let's explore, let's play, let's try, let's create. We're all artists. Let's paint.
So how do we do that in the face of what's happening with government? We have new censorship legislation that appears, it looks like it's going to pass probably within the next few months. We have terrible legislation in Ontario that's, I think, really more about criminalizing thought in school systems, Bill 67. We have protesters being arrested. We have pastors being thrown in jail. Freedom of religion seems to have gone out the window. With all of these things going on, I mean, you have a very optimistic view, but how do we move toward something more positive in the face of all this? I hate to use the word, but it's tyranny.
Yeah, indeed. So like first, like stop giving them so much energy. Like if they're gonna like start criminalizing thought within schools, like take your kids out of schools, like start homeschooling your kids. If they're gonna like start regulating the internet, well, they say they want to do that. Even if they pass law, like what does that actually mean? Does that mean you're not going to be able to create this show? Like, are you on Rumble? Like, well, let's look at decentralized services. Let's look at like, we're just going to have to innovate and create. And it's like, and find alternative paths. Like, create stickers, get a printer, get a radio. Like, I don't know. Where there's like there are many different paths that can be taken. Like come together with the community. Like let's create our own polling systems around, is this what the people actually want? Because again, like, and this is a challenge. As long as we continue to support this existing system and allow it to just do whatever the heck it wants, it's just going to keep coming after us with more and more bullshit and bullshit and bullshit. They're going to keep pushing and pushing. So like, but at the end of the day, it's like, I think instead of protesting, how about having just dance parties and like, coming together instead of it being angry? Like, how do we keep the vibration really high and like, in co-creation? And that's what I really felt was so strong about Ottawa was like, it wasn't like, a yelling march. It was a real kind of sit-in movement. How can we enable more of that within society? How can we like, at the core, it's community and coming together and connecting and creating. But yeah, there's definitely a lot to, take like, I don't know, I heard someone calling like black pilling. And then that's like, just like being just a naysayer about all. And I mean, it's important to like be conscious of things, but to be hopeless is, I don't think that serves us. It's not a very good way to live.
So I think we're on
life
the
ends
same
tomorrow.
page when I've said many times, I think we need to get more creative because we've seen even this week, Jeremy McKenzie arrested, another person in Nova Scotia arrested for protesting outside the medical officer of health's home. Truckers thrown in jail, all of these things. And I said, just yesterday, it doesn't, we don't want people to get arrested. We want people to remain lawful and peaceful. And if they make it illegal to protest, then we have to find other creative ways to make our voices heard.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, and one of the things is music. And like, I remember watching the end of that stuff go down in Ottawa and I was like, oh man, it's like, where are the sound boxes? Like, where are the sound boxes? Because I saw one, I was like, dude, you like, and I was down here. Had I been on the ground there, I would have had probably 4 or 5 giant portable speakers with me to go like right to those front of those lines and be blasting out insanely high vibration music and like, just because like just decoupling that situation, especially around all the media cams that were showing off and all the, they're catching all that. Like you put on like, Here Comes the Sun by the Beatles or, Good Vibrations by Beach Boys or like, Get Up Stand Up by
that.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's so many there's so many or like, but the power of the music, like that is our weapon. Like,
I think that's where we're kind of winning the culture war in some sense. That if you look at what what we're producing, like you're getting people making songs out of FJB and Let's Go Brandon and all this stuff. These songs are hitting the charts like hard, to the point where Apple will try and censor them and that sort of stuff. But look at the opposite side. What you're getting Stephen Colbert dancing with a bunch of mannequins dressed as needles. Like, give me a break. Like, they're losing that side of the culture war so bad.
So troubling. So troubling. And I think we see the mimetic warfare too, and like the power of memes.
Yes.
So like keep creating memes, like, just keep it up. And like to look at like, just that power. It's like, this is like Marshall McLuhan said, World War III won't be, military kind of war. It'll be a guerrilla information war with no clear delineation between civilian or military. And I think that's exactly what we're in right now. And, we've got to look at all different ways to do this. And, every day, like on my computer here, like you should see it, like I should show you. I've got like, the I've got all these Bitcoin stickers that are like there's like a MasterCard one that says mine Bitcoin. The other one's Bank of America that says blockchain. And then I've also got a sticker here that says the 10 principles of Burning Man. And like, that always kind of come back to that. And I'd say like, with what we saw in Ottawa was like, I called it allusion to like freezing man, where it was like, there was radical inclusion, there's radical self-expression, radical self-reliance, decommodification, gifting, communal effort, immediacy, participation, leaving no trace, and then civic responsibility. And civic responsibility is like, one of the core ones to this. And this is where we're at right now. It is the duty of all Canadians who are feeling oppressed or feeling part of the system or feeling like ashamed of whatever is taking place to become civically responsible. We are Canadians. We have voices. We have power. Let's use that. Let's become creative. Let's get involved. You can get involved in different ways. You can get involved at a town council. You can get involved in community council. You can get involved at the provincial level. You can get involved at the federal level. I would highly suggest, getting involved as local as possible, because the federal system is a total shit show and it's a total disastrous mess. And ultimately, like, we're going to look at building systems, but get involved at those local levels. Get in touch with your community. Like, host a party, host a block party. Like, fear not this virus that kept us all disconnected and kept us out of the pubs drinking and socializing, kept us out of the gyms where we'd also talk and share. Like, kind of reconnect. Let's discuss. You don't have to have all the answers either. Let's just try. I don't have all the answers. You don't have all the answers. None of us do. But we know that there's, little things that we can do to, become more empowered. If you're in big cities, it's tougher. If you're in a smaller town, it's much more possible to, to get consensus. Look at some ancient things too. Get a men's circle going on. Get a women's circle going on. Like, connect with your sexes. Like, connect with your powers. Connect with the masculine. Connect with the feminine. Like, discuss. Like, fathers come together. Mothers come together. Those are powerful things. We're not some sort of homogenous, humans here. We are definitely, there is great power in both the male and the female, and they're different. And that's cool. And I think this is another attack that has been happening lately, been on the masculine and the feminine and on man and woman.
I don't know a lot about that stuff because I'm not a biologist.
Right?
No, just kidding. Yeah,
I get it. I get it. But it's like, they're coming at its full scale, and
and none of this even means that you have to stick with whatever traditional norms are. You could, I know some women who could beat the crap out of most men, and I know most men who could beat the crap out of just about anybody, and I know some men who could cook a lot better than some women, and I know some women who can cook better than everybody too. It's one of those things that doesn't really matter, but there is power in those roles, and those roles are very powerful.
Mm-hmm.
there's so much that they could do.
So we have
It's
some. Sorry, go ahead, Brendan.
It's like the expression behind every powerful man is a powerful woman, right? Like it's stuff like that. We do need to come back to that because we're letting this tear our society apart, and it's a non-issue as far as I'm concerned. And the people that it is an issue to is such a fractionally small margin of society that the media.
And it's not really an issue to anybody, but they're just making it an issue. It's like, it's just made up politics. And that's the difference. Remember in Wakefield, Quebec, there's a really cool studio, and I remember being in the back of it one night and seeing it was a venue, and there was like this great piece of art that was like politics is insulated. Policy is insulated from politics. I remember that, that simple saying, really stuck with me, because, these politicians, they'll play all day long, but the real policy is all behind it, and it's it's really protected. And these issues that they make such a big deal out of, all the time, they don't really affect anybody. And then they issue these massive dictates that really affect everybody, and there's no discussion. So, should we do some questions, Rick?
Yes, absolutely. So I have, let's see what we have here. Terry Darling says, Rick, please ask Kyle about Archbishop Fagano's message to Canadians and the truckers. Are you familiar with that?
I am not. And I will also say that this is tobacco as well. Just letting people, I roll my own tobacco. So Archbishop Vigano, he's the Montreal or is the Quebec Archbishop, right? He
released a video with a very specific message to the truckers that was inspirational. Actually, I believe I have it here. I can run it if you'd like to see it and comment on it. It's very powerful. I don't know if you choose to. I don't need to.
I mean, if we want to, I'm down. Okay. I know, that I'll say, the current Vatican Pope is I was talking to Patrick Coffin the other day, and he's, I would suggest checking him out about looking into the anti-Pope discussions and how there's lots of questions, because really, he's doing Satan's work, not the God's work.
Yes, I have to say I'm very disappointed in the Pope. But yeah, let's run this and we'll get your comments on it. I'm pretty sure this is the right video.
Sure.
Yeah. It's worth watching for.
It's a little low res, but this version, but you'll get it.
The global coup that in these 2 years has been carried out by the globalist elite appears more clearly if you do not limit ourselves to considering what happened in individual nations, but broaden our gaze to what has happened everywhere. Your protest, dear Canadian truck driver friends, joins a worldwide chorus that wants to oppose the establishment of the new world order on the trouble of nation states through the Great Reset designed by the World Economic Forum and by the United Nations under the name of Agenda 2030. And we know that many heads of government have participated in the Klaus Schwab's School for Young Leaders, the so-called Global Leaders for Tomorrow. It would seem that Canada is, along with Australia, Italy, Austria, and France, one of the nations most infiltrated by the globalists. You understood this instinctively, and your yearning for freedom was shown in all its coordinated harmony, moving forwards to the capital, Ottawa. Dear truck drivers, you are facing great difficulties, not only because you give up your work to demonstrate, but also because of this adverse weather condition, long night in the cold, and attempts to be clear away that you face. But along with these difficulties, you have also experienced the closeness of many of your fellow citizens who, like you, have understood the looming threat and want to support you in protesting against the regime. Allow me also to express to you my support and my spiritual closeness, to which I join the prayer of your event may be crowned with success and may also extend to other countries. In this day, we see the mask of tyrant from all over the world fall, and unfortunately we also see so much conformism, so much fearfulness, so much cowardice in people who up until yesterday were regarded as friends, even among our family members. Yet, precisely because of this extreme situation, we discover with amazement gestures of a humanity made by strangers, signs of solidarity and brotherhood on the part of those who feel close to us in the common battle. We discover so much generosity, so much desire to shake us from this stupor. We discover that we are no longer willing to passively suffer the destruction of our world imposed by a cabal of unscrupulous criminals, thirsty for power and money. In this relentless attack on the traditional world, not only your way of life and your identity have been affected, but also your possession, your activities, and your work. This is the Great Reset. This is the future promised by the slogan like Build Back Better. This is the future of billions of people being controlled in their every move, in all their transactions, in every purchase, every bureaucratic practice, every activity. Automatons without soul or wills, deprived of their identity, reduced to having a universal income that allows them to survive, to buy only what others have already decided to put up for sale. Today, more than ever, it is essential that you realize that it is no longer possible to passively assist. It is necessary to take a position, to fight for freedom, to demand respect for natural freedoms. But even more, dear Canadian brothers, it is necessary to understand that this dystopia serves to establish the dictatorship of the New World Order and totally erase every trace of our Lord Jesus Christ from society, from history, and from the tradition of peoples. Demonstrate for your right, Canadian friends, but may this right not be limited to a simple claim to the freedom to enter supermarkets or not to be vaccinated. May it also be a proud and courageous claim to your sacrosanct right to be free men. The truth will make you free. And may God bless you all.
Powerful words.
Yes. So he is the former chief diplomat to the Vatican in the United States. He also called for the resignation of Pope Francis at one point, and he is clearly a thorn in the side of the establishment.
Well, and I mean, I think he really just, his words were so impeccable, and then this was obviously recorded pre the whole Ukraine next step. How do we like, continue to force and distract people into, another narrative illusion?
And that's just it, right?
And the media has tried to cancel him. They're smearing him, calling him a conspiracy theorist, of course.
Well, and like, and that's just it. I mean, they just do that, and a lot of people are like, have been so programmed. It's like, into not only like believing the lies, but now into defending the lies. And like, the word conspiracy theorist is like a trigger word to instantly to cancel or not listen to anybody for what they have to say, because it's a conspiracy. It's like, these big myths in society. The same happened with 9/11. It's just conspiracy theory. We can't talk about any of the glaring questions and like, the primary footage that warrants all this kind of evidence. Just like with Corona, with this alleged pandemic, like we can't have any questions or debate around like the models that were used, or like, Professor Drosden, where did that initial gene sequence come from, the efficacy of the PCR test, the safety of these experimental gene therapy injections being branded as vaccines. That's these big myths, and people defend the myth too. Once they're heavily programmed into it, they become like, it's like that scene from The Matrix when Neo's walking in the test environment. It's like every single one of these people, Agent Smith, can come out and kill you. And that's the same kind of, that's what's happening all around you. Like, those who really haven't taken the red pill, if you say, like, they'll come back to those programmed matrix lies and reinforce them and propagate them. So it really stems from the media. It's like, the key piece in this: media, government, corporations, all working together, big industries all working together as part of this new world order agenda. These companies are not the product of capitalism. Many people like hammer on capitalism. These super corps are not the result of capital, of like a free market economy. They're the result of fascistic economy. It's the result of the state working with, encouraging, supporting, subsidizing the creation of these massive entities. And this whole coronavirus pandemic was not, they could have played this any year in history. They tried a couple times, but like, until it got this sophisticated, and also like with the Amazon and the Instacart and the Netflix and all the different kind of tools being ready, like this was their full court press on this towards their stated goal of global injections, and they're rolling it out right now. And I mean, how stupid do you have to be seeing very clearly that like you can overcome this, it's not that deadly, to roll up your sleeve and inject it because you're told it's for your safety and it's for the common good and it's the right thing to do, and all those ridiculous lines that Justin uses towards saying that you're all doing our part as part of like the collective blind cowardly bubble to participate and like save each other from this fake threat that was all outlined, and the entire plan was outlined and acted out at Event 201 in New York, where they like role played the whole bloody thing, and they got everybody, all the major corporations, on board with like the pre-programming for how it's going to roll out and how to get on board with it and how to support this this coronavirus pandemic. And then we never actually had a pandemic. They changed the definition of what pandemic really what
was necessitated to have a pandemic. Everything is so clearly out there. And like, kudos to guys like Reiner Fulmich who are doing like, the grand jury of the court of public opinion, like, creating an independent creation to try and look into all these things, because, we learned 9/11 commission, it was total cover up. Like, it wasn't didn't investigate anything. And like, and they're going to do the same thing in Ottawa with the trucker commission. Whenever that kind of gets started, it's going to be a total cover up, and they're not going to address anything that went on. They're going to look at who knows what they're going to do, but it's going to be a mess. And I think, it's important that we develop alternative systems. And like, I think information and polling, like information and knowledge is power in all this, and giving people the ability to participate in civic engagement and civic structures is critical. So I think that's like, what we really need to lead on. So let's hope every one of the questions doesn't lead to a 7-minute video. And
That's right. Somebody was asking, what cryptocurrency exchange do you recommend, Kyle? And I think you already said Edge Wallet is.
I like Edge Wallet as a wallet, and I mean I like Coinberry in Canada. There's also ShakePay in Canada. There's also like Kraken in the United States. Jesse donated, the CEO there. He made a donation of 1 Bitcoin towards the trucker fund. They're definitely a freedom and privacy oriented exchange. Yeah, but I'd again just recommend like exchanges are where you go to trade, and like. But then withdraw your funds from exchanges into your own self-custody wallet. In addition to that, I'd recommend everybody use a password manager too. Use secure passwords across different sites, so you're not vulnerable to like password reuse kind of attacks. And like if someone gains access to your Gmail, they can't go and like ruin your whole life or your Facebook or anything like that. Like you create a new password for everything, and also like put your coins, or keep your passwords for your crypto products there too if you want. And also plan contingencies for if something happens to you. So if you use a password manager, like write down your password in an envelope, or break it up into 3 pieces and put it in 3 different envelopes, and like distribute it just in case something should happen to you.
Somebody wants me to ask you some hard-hitting questions, but you're not a politician. And you're just here to help people, so I'm not going to sit here and hammer on you. That's not what I'm here for tonight.
Like ask whatever you want.
I don't have anything I don't have an axe to grind with you tonight at all. But
sure.
Somebody is asking.
Maybe somebody does.
Yeah.
Have you ever had a discussion with Justin Trudeau about 9/11 being an inside job?
I'm gonna leave now. literally, just that's what he would do. He cannot engage. Could like just ears, like fingers in the ears, and leave.
Even like 20 years ago.
Well, yeah. I mean, 20 years ago is like, yeah. It wasn't until probably I think when Loose Change came out, like 2003 or 2005.
Yeah, something like that.
That was when it took a long time for like
That's why I thought, it seems to me he's known about this since Loose Change at least came out, and so you might have.
Yeah, no, I did. Like I remember we had a really interesting scene when around the SPP summit in Montebello, where they were caught using agent provocateur as part of like trying to incite violence and create a vicious crackdown on peaceful protesters. And I remember talking to Justin about that, and he just could not engage. He literally left the campfire and went and read a book in his tent. Like, that was it.
So how do you get along with Justin? Like I'm getting, it seems like there's some disconnect and friction, and he's only your half brother, so you didn't really grow, or did you really grow up with him, or not really?
I grew up with him like very, very closely. Like, he was 13 years older than me, so he was like a big brother, and I learned a lot from him. And like, he taught me how to snowboard. We were like going canoe trips together, and like, we spent a lot of time. We'd do water sports, and like we'd compete in games and challenges and things like that. And I feel like I learned a lot from him. He has a really good ability to connect with people. At least he did have a really good ability to connect with people.
But yeah, they definitely, like, you know, as like post 9/11, post learning the way that systems actually work, post working in business and like, you know, and in value creation and all these amazing industries like crypto and just my life has taken me through. It's like, you know, versus like, what did he do? I mean, he's a snowboard instructor and was really good at that, and then was like, you know, a whitewater raft guide, and he was really good at that and had great parties there. Somebody else wrote this book for him.
I was going to ask you that. I was like, I don't think he's smart enough to read this book. And mind you, I took 30 minutes at a charity shop to sit on the couch there and read this. And I was like, oh my gosh, I could not read that whole book. I was sick to my stomach.
I don't know. This is just like these long books that like all politicians write, and they don't actually write them. He didn't write that book. No way.
No way.
No way. No way.
Eddie says, does your brother planning to steal the votes or steal the votes in 2025 like he did now? So I guess they're questioning the integrity of the election.
Well, I mean, this is like, I think there's questions around the integrity of the election, but I think like just in general, the schema and the basis of our Canadian electoral system is broken, and it doesn't allow outside voices, you know, to be in there. I'd say the PPC party like did a valiant effort. You know, in retrospect, had they been like, you know, everything onto the Conservative Party, maybe that had changed things. But again, it's like, you know, they're not, because a lot of people recognize like the Conservative Party is just a corporatist party as well. So they're trying to start something there. There's a lot of momentum there. There's only ever been two powers in party though in Canada: the Liberals and the Conservatives. That's it. Never had a third party in power. Do you expect that to change? I don't really. So
what do you make of this coalition?
Honestly, what I think of this coalition is it is a way for all the NDP, for them to not be running into confident votes at every turn, and to not call an election soon. And I think the NDP know that they'll get absolutely roasted if they go to the polls, based on how they've completely betrayed their traditional working class electorate. And so there's, I don't know how many, 60 NDP members, something like that. That's 60 jobs. That's like, you know, that's $150K per each of them, plus their staff for the next 3 years. So basically they voted for that. I also heard someone that, like, you know, Jagmeet Singh, if he stays in office until 2025, he gets his full pension. So it's like, dude, it's honestly, it's like personal money is what this is all coming down to. And I wish there could just be like a philanthropic fund set up to be like, here's just, you guys need, your pensions are that desperate. Like, here, take this now, just F off, and let's reclaim, let's start actually engaging, because it's really dangerous what's taken place, and how you know, now there's effectively a majority government. And there's no accountability on any of them. And I mean, they haven't even released a budget, I think, in 3 years. So, you know, I think we're supposed to expect a budget this year or this month. They don't have a budget. Their budget is, we're going to spend like 10 times more money than we earn, and keep playing with our funny money, and just like, you know, at the loss to all Canadians. And like, look, Canadians are struggling.
It seems like they're just applying this idea, or this theory of modern monetary theory, and just using that as an excuse to print as much money as they want.
Yeah, well, and they've also recognized that, like, I think at a global, like a geopolitical macro level, it's about wealth transfer from nations to the corporates, and then the corporatocracy and its shareholders, you know, at the cost of all kind of Canadians. Yeah, so, you know, they just can continue to do that, and inflation is the way that we all end up paying for it. And, you know, and then the gas prices too is like, you know, that's one that's really hitting everybody hard.
It also probably is a great dissuader from more convoys taking place at the moment.
Jonathan Chachuk says, freedom is not won or defended with dance parties, hippie boy. It's paid by blood. Well, there's a negative comment. But I would argue, and I'll get your comment on this, that the success of the Freedom Convoy, and I think it was a success in Ottawa, even though the cops came in there and used violence on their side to break it up, what was a peaceful protest, it was very successful because it brought people together. It did, I think, initiate change and the rollbacks on some of these mandates. We saw some changes even within the Conservative Party federally. So I think that it was a catalyst for at least the beginning of some positive change, getting back to something.
It cleared many objectives, including one of them being like Quebec isn't the most authoritarian province anymore. Nova Scotia is. Like, I didn't ever thought that
and
would
like
happen.
and Aaron O'Toole felt like dropped out, so there was there was a political resignation as a result of it, but but I would also say it's paid by blood. So what does that mean? Like violence. Had that thing turned violent, like then what? Like then I think it would have been a we'd be talking a different tune right now. But I respect that, Jonathan, and 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 in the past it has been a lot of blood has been spilt, and I don't think like freedom, like World War I, World War II, dude, a lot of blood got spilt there, but the same powers earned a shit ton of money out of that and more power and control. They're funding both sides of the war. That's like happened over and over and over in the course of history. So I don't think that that's necessarily the right path for this.
And so what's your view on Ukraine? Because I feel like the media is again spinning up narrative. We're getting propaganda on both sides. It's
there used to be Nazis there. Now there's no Nazis. It's all confusing. Well, not to us.
Yeah, I mean, look at the revolution of 2014. Everything that happened since then. Look at like who's behind, whatever that actor is. Look into his money situation. Look at the interests. Look at the geopolitical ramifications of this. Look at NATO. Look at look at Russia. Look at all this. They've used this as an opportunity to now wield massive global attack against Russia and the people of Russia through corporate activities. And then it's another thing. It's like all of a sudden, instead of Uber now just being all about wearing masks, now it's like donate to Ukraine. Same with Airbnb. They're all literally piled onto this whole Ukraine activity. People are scared of law enforcement and government actions. I mean, I think people are scared of law enforcement. We've been police have been also militarized over the last little bit. But I think what we saw in Ottawa was that the police were, basically supportive by and large of what was going on. They didn't want to cause any shit because ultimately they have an oath towards the people. So I think law enforcement is definitely who needs to continue to step up and enforce the law. And when you see so many of these politicians and their actors and the corporations breaking the law and actively committing murder against Canadians, committing genocide against Canadians, at some point you guys got to step up. I don't have a badge, but a lot of Canadians do, and a lot of free Canadians do. So it's let us stand up for this and take them to task. But I know there's definitely at some point getting really angry and violent becomes the idea. And people suggest as well that why it doesn't happen in America is because they have guns. Well, in Canada they don't necessarily have guns so much anymore. A lot of Canadians do have guns, but ultimately this is an information war that's being fought. And I think as if we can build new systems that enable people to the tools that we can help to fight this are new systems that enable people to come together and share voice and presence, and more demonstrations like what happened in Ottawa would be good.
In Rise Movement says, Kyle, for PM in Canada, virtual hug, do you have any political aspirations?
Virtual hug to you too. No, like I'm like the people always say that, but are you like? There's no chance. There's no chance to become prime minister in Canada means like understanding the reality of the situation was you had to go through all those steps, and there's so much kind of gatekeeping and conditioning to make sure you're there. I don't have any oaths. I have one oath. I have an oath to my wife Brittany. That's the only oath. And I suppose to my children too, but I'm not part of any societies. I didn't take an oath to Klaus. I didn't I didn't participate in any sick and twisted rituals. I'm not in that. And plus, like Justin in his current PM role, and frankly for the last 7 years, it's not a free man. It's not freedom. It's basically slavery. And he's living, and he's got while it's opulent slavery, he's living in a really fancy prison cell, but he's living in a prison cell. And he doesn't have free will. He doesn't have freedom of thought. He doesn't have freedom of speech. But he made that decision. He took that deal on top of the mountain. Like instead of realizing that, kingdom is this heaven on earth and belongs to everybody. We don't, it's Hong Kong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's your response to the idea that was put forward that really means Heil Hitler?
Hong Kong?
Yeah, which politician was it that said that, Brendan?
I don't know. That of course, and I saw that you go on like Urban Slang Dictionary or something like that, or that was listed in there. I don't think so at all. I think Hong Kong was a symbol of the freedom. And I mean, at the early days of the thing, I was suggesting that everybody gets whistles. We start blowing our whistles, calling out all the whistleblowers, everybody who's inside the system who has seen something wrong. Blow your friggin' whistles. Stand up, talk. Like, don't be afraid to be a whistleblower. This.
Have you boys seen the Freedom Tunes version of that?
No.
I don't know if you guys ever seen Freedom Tunes, but they did a animated short about it.
About what?
About the MP who tries to say anybody who says Hong Kong is just vitriol for Heil Hitler.
Yeah, it's so ridiculous, and it's just like as part of their that's the only thing that they had. The only thing they could do was to just slander and smear, and that's why they needed that Confederate flag, and that's why they needed that one swastika, and they just channeled everything on that, just add into this right wing extremist, whatever. Justin used all those silly words, and then it was repeated over and over and over again, and it's trying to just marginalize, the entire movement. When it was so radically inclusive, it brought together people from all over, of all different backgrounds, of all different political affiliations. They're literally voters who voted for all the parties. And now that we've seen the reaction to that, they're terrified about holding another election. Faith in government is at an all-time low. So,
should we roll the cartoon?
Yeah, sure, if you want. I hope it's not
it's only
too
about
long.
32 seconds.
Okay. All right.
34 seconds.
freedom.
How much vitriol do we have to see of Hong Kong, which is an acronym for Hail Hitler?
Nazi! Nazi! Nazi!
Freeze the bank account of everyone who protests against me. Good luck paying your rent or buying food.
Good.
That's I don't know. I'm a big fan of cartoons, so that was
good. Good job. Create. Keep creating in any way we all can. Murals, songs, cartoons, papers, books,
exactly
tech, code, driving, growing. Like it goes on and on. Everybody in their own ways.
People are asking if we accept Bitcoin here, and We don't at the moment. I have Bitcoin. We could. I suppose we should. You can donate by going to freedomreporters.com or clicking the links in the YouTube, Facebook, and Rumble descriptions. We'll be on other video platforms soon as well. So you can donate that way. And there's also information on there to e-transfer, which you can do at maverickmultimedia at mail.com as well, if you're so inclined. But even if you're just watching, it is free to air here or free online. And you can just support us by liking, subscribing, sharing, and clicking the notification bell. And Terry French says, my Catholic faith has gotten him through some really tough times. I can tell you that. I just thought maybe you'd like to comment on the arrest of pastors and what I think it's been a war on religion through much of this. What do you think of that?
Totally agree. And I think there's a war going on inside the religious establishment with for example the Pope getting full on board with this. I know that down here in America the religious I don't want to say scene but community is very strong. I was at Clay Clark's Reawaken tour event a couple weeks ago. Oh man, it was awesome. General Flynn, Clay Clark did a 20-minute video going through the whole agenda, and they had Thomas Lawrence there, Patrick Byrne there, there's so many awesome people there, and it was just big room, connected, a whole bunch of pastors there. There's definitely a war on spirit taking place. And I don't identify as a Christian or a Catholic or a Muslim or a Jew or anything like that, but I have huge respect. I believe Jesus shines his light on me every day. I'd say that with 100% certainty. But I think we need to have there's power of spirit has been the one that they can't kind of cut off. And I think they're trying to. Some people are postulating that this gene therapy injection is trying to help cut out that access to spirit, which is very possible. They've been coming after our pineal glands for a long time. And if you don't know about your pineal gland, research it. Research ways that you can decalcify it, because that will help you get in touch with the multidimensional being that you are, and to be able to see more clearly and receive downloads from the ether.
I've said here many times that I think they want to strip society of religion because our individual rights, as written in the Constitution and the Charter, recognize the supremacy of God. And if you take that out, it gives all the power to the state.
Yep. And these guys said churches were burning in Canada. Are you kidding me? There's no mention about that. What? Yeah. How? What?
Yes.
We can there's just no respect for Canadians. And the same thing with for white Canadians. All of a sudden you're just 80% of Canadians. Are you kidding me? You make everybody feel I remember my mother, and she was like, "Oh, you need to feel guilty because I'm white." What? You have to feel guilty because you're white? Are you kidding me?
She
Don't
said
feel
that to
guilty.
you?
Don't feel guilty. This is ridiculous. Don't feel
there's-
guilty. This is no. And don't feel sad for other groups. That's one of the other things is man, our government has done a really great job of making the indigenous communities or the native communities or the people who inhabited North America before the European settlers arrived. They've done a great job of making them the victims and creating victim mentality out of them all. And that is not a place to succeed from. If your whole life you're told you're a victim over and over and over again, you're going to just start playing that role. F that. Stand up. Take your power back. Come together as a community, honor your ancient traditions, take back your sacred sites, free the falls in Ottawa. Let's do it. Like, you know, recognize we're all children of this earth. Let's not get wrecked by the skin color, hair color, eye color. Like,
Well,
you know,
I think what happened in Canada last May was a total psyop, and I'm not going to be able to really delve into it on this show right now, but it was very much mass formation psychosis. Lauren Southern's channel has perfect explanations on it. You should just go there and educate yourself on it, but it was a total psyop.
What do you mean by last May? Like the BLM?
No,
No,
the
Every
graves,
Child Matters.
the Indigenous.
Yeah,
Oh.
the Indigenous graves and everything with that. Like,
Yeah.
it was a total psyop. It was all designed to make everybody feel bad. And
Yeah,
push the
exactly. It
agenda.
was like this
And-
big.
and-
And also to take that Canada Day, like, and to just make it a sad day.
and
Oh,
throw it in
yeah.
the garbage.
Like, oh yeah, all
And you know what?
Canadians, you
It-
should
it-
feel guilt.
It's not religion they're going after. It's Christianity they're going after, because they want all the other religions, but they want Christians, and they want to get rid of Judeo-Christian Christian ideas. They want those ideas gone.
So it's almost like. So it's almost like instead of going after, like Hitler went after the Jews, they're coming after the Christians.
Could be. I don't know enough about it, but the
Well,
proof is in the pudding, because they're not.
They're coming after everybody, but
Yeah.
like,
But
you know,
they're not going after mosque or.
Well, the
or,
one thing it did accomplish is it allowed them to capture our flag, because Justin ordered the flag to be flown at half staff for months. And
yeah, like no end in sight. I think the same thing
Yeah.
was happening in America too.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, and again, it's this victimhood thing, and like, you know, this collective guilt, when it's like, hey guys, how about instead you recognize that it wasn't Canadians from all over the country that were setting up residential schools and doing terrible things to, you know, to innocent victims. Oh God, it's so disgusting. But like, there's a real issue of accountability. It was government, it was a church. That was it. And it wasn't the low level clergy. It was high level clergy. And it was government that was behind that. It was government dollars. Just because Canadian taxpayers were funding the government doesn't mean it's a Canadian's fault of this. You hold no guilt for that as a Canadian. That was the government. That was the government's fault. And that was the church's fault. Those were the crimes committed by the government and the church, and they should be held accountable for that. You, as Canadians, should not be held responsible for that. And same with to the communities that were affected. Do not blame all Canadians for that. Blame the church and blame the government at the time who committed those things. Seek accountability from them, and stop and like, do not allow yourself to fall victim to being a victim in this, and to like putting all your problems on somebody else, because that takes away your power. Retake your power. Stand up for yourself. Use your voice. Come together as a community. Don't take any more money from the government. They're going to promise you clean drinking water. F that. Go clean your drinking water. Put a call to action out there. Say, hey, Elon, can you come help with clean drinking water? Or like, you know, send that tweet to 1,000 different people. And like, invite people to come and build this. Say, instead of we're operating and trying to just take money from the government because you need subsidies, like that's like living on welfare. Like, you don't need to do that. You own the resources. You have great knowledge. You have great power. You have great community. You have great traditions. You have you know, rich history. You have intelligent. They come together. You have land, resources. Let's work. Let's work to solve problems, to becoming abundant and prosperous as can be. And like, you know, to living fulfilled lives. And also look into your own councils too. Look at your chiefs. Talk to your grandmothers. Look at your chiefs. Look at the money that the chiefs are taking. Are they representing our tribe, or are they representing themselves? Are you holding true to those old values? Talk to the grandmothers. Have circles. Enact the circles. You know, bring it back.
It's interesting to hear you say that, because I've often said that these government programs, including UBI, they're like a trap. And somebody here just in the comments was writing slavery. if you want to see the effects of welfare and government dependence, just look at what's going on, First Nations reserves.
Yeah, well, and it's like, and it's a multi-headed problem. It's not just the welfare; it's also like a lack of leadership from within and taking care of their own. And
it's difficult living in a remote community, which many of these live millions of miles away from.
And corruption and the government twisting these programs to benefit some of their, the people that they owe favors to, or.
Well, and also shutting down their ancient practices and their way of life, and perverting it with these Western ideals of hypermaterialism along with alcohol, which alcohol specifically, it's just be honest, natives aren't good with alcohol. Same with black people, they're not good with alcohol. And I know it's just clear, these bloodlines are not meant to do not deal well with alcohol. Europeans are very accustomed to drinking alcohol, and that's why it doesn't affect them so nearly as strongly. But it's because there's been literally thousands and thousands of years of conditioning for our vessels to be able to handle that. But people that just do not handle it so well. And that's not racist to say that. That's a key observation about the effect of substances on certain types of people and their body types and on their bodies and their genetic structures. Let's be careful before we just give away too much booze to certain people. Alcohol is terrible.
Yeah, it's terrible for everybody.
It's terrible for everybody. It's especially terrible for some groups of people.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I'm interested on your views on the current gas prices and the way they keep pointing their finger at Russia to say that Putin is to blame. But it seems to me that a lot of the problems we're facing with higher gas prices, higher grocery prices, higher housing prices, it's the response of government that has created these problems for us.
Yep. And it's I'm not an expert on gas prices, but I would say who determines the gas prices? Where does that actually come from? How does it go? Because it feels it's a cartel that's in control of it. There isn't too much freedom within that market. And, you should it feels like it's kind of just a societal weapon used against us.
Somebody else is asking some questions about Fidel Castro. So, is Justin really your brother? Or
well, I think I'm pretty sure he came from my mother. So,
yeah, right. That's right.
So I think that he's my half brother. No matter what, but I don't know. I do genetic testing if you want that answer. That seems like the most.
I don't buy that theory.
I don't buy it either. I think it's just a big distraction, and it's it's one of these. It's just get people talking about something else. It's it's just there's misinformation and there's disinformation, and that one feels like it could be disinfo. But it's close enough though, and also those photos. And you saw some of those photos, and some of those photos I'm like, where did that photo come from? Never saw that photo ever before until last year.
It is funny. It was funnier when it first started circulating, but it's not. I wouldn't say it's funny so much anymore. But I really don't subscribe to it. People ask me that question all the time in person, and I go, yeah.
Well, and at the end of the day, does it matter? Why are let's stop giving Justin so much attention and power. Don't let him get you angry. Don't let the system get you angry. Just give it your power by doing that. Just recognize that it's a it's a shitty movie, and just turn it off. Let's just turn it off.
It's interesting. I was reluctant to even mention Justin in the description and I said this the other night too. Because I'm interested in what you have to say. I guess, do you find it difficult to live in Justin's shadow because of his position that he's acquired?
I don't know. definitely people love to run with that and make that intro and do this and that, and it's like, okay, like, I guess that's kind of to be expected, but I just try not to take things personally anymore. So it's like, it kind of is what it is, and I speak to a whole bunch of different subjects, and if that helps bring people like in, then great. The discussion, sure. I mean, if this can be, if that helps us think about, the ways that we operate society and the models that we can build for society, then great. Then sure, let's leverage that. But I'm not out there actively like, I'm Justin Trudeau's brother, like, get me on your show, blah blah blah. No, I don't even like. I honestly, I haven't. I don't try and push things that much anymore. Like, if we want to show up and talk, let's do it. If we get an invitation to connect, let's do it. Apologies for not showing up on Wednesday or yesterday either. But I'm really glad that we made this happen.
I really enjoyed our conversations, actually, and if it makes you feel any better, I think you are far cooler than Justin Trudeau ever could be.
Justin's pretty cool. I mean, has pretty cool times with them. I like that when he boxed that other guy, that was funny. Like, that was freaking funny.
When he's getting hit ahead,
Patrick Brazeau, that's just funny. I mean, but like, let's. Whatever. I'm just doing the best I can. Appreciate that, Brennan. Like, let's like, I'm really fortunate. Like, I have a different last name too, because it's enabled me. Like, I've lived all over, and I'm not like, I'm not a Trudeau, and I don't have any of that like allegiance or the funds either. Like, I'm on Patreon. Patreon.com/Kyle Kemper. Like, if you want to support me and continue to speak my truths, I'm trying to do that. I try, like, I've avoided working in corporate, for big corporates for a long time, because I want to, like, I'm kind of entrepreneur, value creator, generator, activator, and right now I'm just kind of trying to push forward this message and help realize DAOs and CanaDAO, and I just have.
That's right. Buy his book.
Been a helper. You can buy the book on Amazon, or you can. I also did a reading of it, which is probably even better than buying it. It's on YouTube on my channel. It's free. There's a link to donate Bitcoin if you want to, or you can join Patreon again if you want to. It's up to you. But if you want to support social innovators and entrepreneurs, I'm one of those guys, and it would be really great. The more resources that I have at hand, the more better tools I can have, the more impact that I can have.
So the book they can get on Amazon. Is there any other place they can?
No, it's just on Amazon. So I just self-published it on Amazon, and it's just an ebook list. It's a short one. It's the first of what's intended to be a series of this, because again, like, I don't even want like this CanaDAO idea. It's like, that's just like the first kind of like awareness spell towards it, and ultimately it's like when you get more people involved on it, and that's what's happened. Is like we've got a coming together of groups of people who are there's all sorts of people all over Canada who have been thinking about the idea behind CanaDAO or direct democracy or liquid democracy, and so if I can help be a catalyst for bringing people together, fantastic. And so, we've got a Discord where things are talking about this. If you go to canadao.org, there's a join button. There's a form to fill out. We've got little NFTs that we're sending out as thank yous to people for coming in. Yeah, there it is. We got a new website dropping in the next couple of days. Probably launch like a fundraiser for it. We're looking at creating like a CanaDAO DAO, a CanaDAO granting DAO, so raising money into a decentralized DAO where Canadians can make requests for grants to build out things and build out tools. I think like polling and there's so many different things, but like, and also enabling Canadians to like submit their own proposals for how they want to get engaged, and people that have been already on the project to be able to like submit, because if we can get some funds, it makes natural sense that the people contributing on it should be having some sort of financial compensation for their time and energy towards creating this, because this is a big deal, and we're not doing this via like taking Bill Gates money or Klaus Schwab money or like corporate money or government money to create it. It's really clear that it's got to be the people's support, really organic, no strings attached. But the cool thing is with DAOs is there can be strings attached in the fact that if you donate it to it, you get to vote on whether or not you support that type of funding distribution. So yeah, that's pretty neat.
And I'll put it up on the screen here if you give me a website or some other place where people can go to support you. Do you have a URL?
So patreon.com/Kyle Kemper. That's that website. I'm also just on Twitter @Kyle Kemper. I just signed up on Getter @Kyle Kemper. I don't really use Instagram, but I'm Kyle JJ Kemper there. And but yeah, at Kyle Kemper on Twitter is seems to be where a lot of action is. I really hope Elon Musk buys Twitter, by the way. That'd be great.
Yeah.
It seemed like he was talking about that. He's really interesting. He's been, pretty supportive of the truckers and everything. And it feels like got to kind of do that, considering he's probably going to be releasing autonomous trucks, in the coming.
Well, that's just it. He has some of this tech, right? And I'm not so much concerned about what Elon does with it, but I am kind of concerned with whoever takes over his enterprises would do with it, like Neuralink, for example.
Yeah, but I mean, again, it's do you really think Elon Musk is really in control of his own show? I don't. I mean, I think he's got a lot of determination, but he's also
I don't.
One person can only do so much. So it's but I
don't think he's as good for everybody as everybody cheers him on to be. If that makes any sense.
I agree.
I think he talks. I think he tells us one thing, and then he goes.
He is sort of merging human beings with a new digital transhuman future. So.
Yep,
I'm a little worried about that.
Yeah, he hasn't really said anything clearly about the vaccines, or the fake vaccines. He, but he issues some funny ass memes, and he's definitely he's definitely become a bit of a polarizing figure, and I think he's by asking questions and having engagement. Overall, I don't know, that's his method of radical self-expression, and it's pretty awesome. And I think he's really built some some really amazing tech, and I think Teslas are really cool cars. There's definitely threats to riding in a computer, but I like gas cars myself, but whatever, to each their own. I think it's brought a great amount of value to a good many people. So yeah,
I don't want to keep you too much longer, but do you have any further thoughts on transhumanism and the experiments that he's doing right now to connect human beings digitally to expand our minds and work toward what some people would say would be immortality through a digital existence?
Interesting. It's one way to think about it. I mean, I think already we're going through a kind of a transition, just as a species. We've never had access to such incredible technology. Just the fact in our hands, on our phones, we've got this magic wand that's capable of so much, so powerful. I've been reading Little House on the Prairie to my kids last couple of days. Talk about a simpler time. Oh man, simpler, much more kinetic time. But now it's we're we're all like bombarded with so much information. We have so much access to knowledge and to good and to evil and to like, you know, to everything. So it's like we're in this stage, like with respect to like, you know, the trans, like, you know, like integrating technology into people's bodies. I feel like consent is really important with regards to that. Like if you told me you're going to give me nanoparticles that we're going to do this, that, or the other, and like somehow benefit my life, and like, you know, if you were explicit that that's what I was getting, like sure, like okay, that's at least give me the option, as opposed to like, you know, creating this, you know, this pandemic theater and forcing everybody to accept nanoparticles into their bodies that way. Like, you know, luciferase, check that shit out. It's crazy. Like graphene oxide, crazy. Like this tech is really nuts. And then 5G, like what about 5G? Like what, like that seemed like one of the things that you're just not allowed to talk about all of a sudden. I remember David Icke, like they'll let David talk about anything, but as soon as you mentioned 5G, it was like, oh no. Like, you know, that was like, you can't talk about 5G. And I'm literally, they just put a tower up right next to my house. I like, that's one of the reasons why I'm moving. It's like, don't want to be like, you know, EMF smog is definitely like, you know, an environmental kind of consideration. Like we are energetic beings, and like if there are pounding frequencies all around us, like, you know, that can have negative effects on life and people and consciousness. So like, you know, to be aware of that is important. You know, to protect yourself from that, like, you know, I'd say don't sleep with your phone next to your head. Like put it on airplane mode at least, assuming that actually does anything, but pretty sure it does. You can't take the batteries out of it. That's what I liked about those old Blackberries. You can take the batteries right out of them. You can't take the batteries out anymore.
Yeah, I sleep with my phone way too close to my bed, which is probably why I don't look healthy when I'm on here.
Well, and like they also say you can like turn off your Wi-Fi at night too. It's like, you know, you put Wi-Fi on a switch, like turn that off. I think apartment buildings suffer from like insane radiation smog, like every single unit within a building having its own like, you know, high powered modem and transmitter. Yeah, it's kind of dangerous.
Yeah. So again, you can get Kyle's book, CanaDAO, at
CanaDAO. CanaDAO. I like that. That sounds great. I like CanaDAO though. That sounds great. CanaDAO.
Dale.
I knew I was pronouncing
one
it
of
wrong.
Justin's favorite songs, by the way.
Oh no.
Is there anything that you'd like to touch on before we sign off tonight, Kyle, or anything you think we might have been missing?
I mean, I'd say just like as closing, like, yeah, I mean, damn, we go like 3 hours here.
Just 3 hour hangout.
just the last note would be like, you know, there's been so much division that it's time for healing now. And like, despite what Jonathan Chuck said, like dance parties are a great idea. Come together with your communities. Doesn't have to be from a like a civic political point of view. Just come together. And like, there's a great Hawaiian healing ritual called Ho'oponopono. It's 4 simple lines. Say, I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I'm thankful. I love you. And you can say those things first to yourself. Like, apologize to yourself for your past transgressions. Forgive yourselves as well. You can't live in like grief and regret from stuff you did 20 years ago or 10 years ago or 2 days ago. Like, apologize and forgive yourselves for whatever you've done. Be thankful to yourself for everything that you are, for where you are, and love yourself as well. And then like transmute that and share that energy with others as well. So many families have been broken. You know, I say that to Justin, like, you know, I love you. Please forgive me. Thankful. I love you. And to my mother, that to my friends, like, you know, let's try and find some common ground. Let's come together within 6 feet of each other. Let's share in our heart energies. Let's connect openly. Like, leave politics out of it. Just play, celebrate, dance, like, you know, whatever it is. Like, you know, like find, like, we need to go through healing and some sort of in some
kind of grand unification of spirit, because like, you know, they've been like, you know, whoever they are, these groups or just the forces of darkness, are trying to divide, trying to create fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Fear is like really our only enemy, like, you know. And don't be afraid of yourself, and don't be afraid of your words. Like, your actions are everything, and like, you are omnipotent and omniscient. So stand in your power and recognize everybody else has their own power and their own crown on their head, and everybody is the king or queen or their kingdom. And, you know, respect one another. And I'm super grateful, Brandon and Rick, for having shared this 3 hours with you. And let's do it again sometime. And until then, and to everybody who might be listening, thank you very much for being part of this. If you're interested in like connecting, please feel free to connect, or not. It's up to you. Yeah, just do the best you can. Then there's another book too called The Four Agreements that I'd highly recommend everybody read. And I'll just give you the Cole's notes on it. The first agreement is be impeccable with your words. Second agreement is don't take anything personally. Third agreement is don't make assumptions. And the fourth agreement is always do your best. It's a short book, beautiful book, very ancient wisdom, ancient Toltec wisdom, on how you can live a freer and more love-filled, purpose-filled life. So appreciate you guys. Thank you so much.
Appreciate you as well, sir.
Yes, it's been
an absolute pleasure.
Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah, I'm forever in your gratitude for this talk here, and yeah, I'm coming away from this a much better person.
Yeah, it's been a privilege.
Oh, bless you guys. My pleasure. Let's just go forth and, enjoy the rest of this glorious day, and know that the sun will go down and the sun will come up.
All right. And there you
Keep
have
breathing.
it, ladies and gentlemen. Kyle Kemper. Buy his book, CanaDAO. I finally got the name right.
Yeah, CanaDAO. It's a booklet. It's really short too. It's only like 20 pages. It's just, and it's like, yeah, I mean, or you can, I mean, honestly, by listening to this and listening to some of the other stuff, and you can listen to it online, just drop in this concept, percolate this concept, think about it. Like, think about yourself and how you can paint, be that artist that you are. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to go be with my kids now. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you, Kyle.
Insane pleasure.
Kyle.
Amazing.
Right.
Okay. Bye.
Care. Bye for now. And that was awesome. That was great.
Yeah, it was. I think that was probably my favorite interview so far.
Yeah, I didn't hard-hitting questions. Well, it was a conversation. That was what I was expecting it to be. It wasn't like I was here to grill him on anything, right? Or ask hard-hitting journalistic questions. But there were some things that we had to touch on. I think that we're maybe a little bit on the touchy side for him personally, right?
Well, that's just it. I mean, we asked this man to come on our show, and we talk about stuff. And you know what? A lot of the questions that about his family life were intensely
very much so
personal stuff that you're not going to talk about.
Right. And it's gracious of him to come on and share his time with us, because he's not in public office. He's not seeking election, right? He's not
beholden to anybody.
No, he's awesome. I was so looking forward to the conversation, and it was everything that I had hoped it would be. And we covered so much ground, so many different topics, and there's a lot of wisdom in his words, I think, tonight. So
yeah,
I'm grateful.
Very grateful as well. No, it was a good score. Great evening tonight, Rick. It's been an absolute pleasure being here with you.
Yeah, there were some things we didn't get to touch on tonight, folks. I'm sorry we didn't get to it, but Kyle was awesome. We didn't really get to talk much about Joe Biden being in Poland and his address, but maybe we can touch on some of these things tomorrow and get caught up with some of these other stories. But we did mention them, but we didn't get to dig into them as deeply as we normally would. But I think that's okay, because tonight. I think we got a lot more depth on a lot of important subjects by going into things in more detail with Kyle.
Yeah, I agree. And and I mean, Sundays are usually the slower news day anyway, so we can get caught up. We can get caught up tomorrow.
Yeah. So we'll be back tomorrow, folks. If you do want to support our work so we can continue to have these kinds of interviews and bring the kind of guests on of the caliber that we have with tonight with Kyle, you can go to freedomreporters.com. Let me just find that banner. There it is. freedomreporters.com. You can donate there. You can click the hot link in the YouTube, Facebook, and Rumble descriptions. It'll take you right to the donation page, or just type in the URL, freedomreporters.com, and you can donate to support our new journalism right there here on the Maverick News Channel. And I'll throw it over to Brendan for some absolute final thoughts before we leave you this evening.
Well, we've had a lot of interesting discussions today, not only about the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, but we've also had excellent discussions about Bitcoin, creating alternative societies, living outside of the realms of tyranny and the government, and, you know, looking for positivity outside of those things. And it's been a great pleasure to bring everybody on this ride and this discussion this evening. My name is Brendan Kennedy, the co-host for Maverick News. I'll see you tomorrow.
And I'm Rick Walker, also with Maverick News. We are the Freedom Reporters. We are the antivirus program for your mind. We'll be back tomorrow night, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Same bat time, same bat station. Catch you on the flip side. Thanks, everyone, for watching.